Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 701, Suppress. Letitia was brought to the prestigious Cloud School many years ago. Since then, she had begun to practice the martial arts and grow in her strength. Carrying deep in her heart the hatred of having her entire family exterminated, she had never even cried. The only belief that kept her striving forward was that when the day came, she would avenge her family's death. Compared to Cloud Sect, the competition at Cloud School was even more intense. This was understandable as the Cloud Sect was situated in a remote place. The people who had been competing with Zen were a few warriors from some clans. These so-called noble clans were not even worth a mention in the central region. On the other hand, the disciples of Cloud School largely came from the various third-grade noble clans. The reason why Letitia was able to stand out at Cloud School had a lot to do with her outstanding talent, but more importantly, it was her perseverance which made her succeed. When she first came to Cloud School, she had had no kin to turn to and had been all alone. At that time, she had only been a little girl, much younger than the other disciples. Furthermore, she was a stranger who hailed from another place, so she had been constantly ostracized by other members of the Cloud School. However, her sheer willpower, grit, and determination had ensured that she worked hard to improve herself step by step. With no one to support her, she stood out from the crowd of the millions of Cloud School disciples. At the same time, she secured the first place in the Cloud Road test. After entering Cloud Hall, she had become what one would describe as a dazzling star. She had come to be the disciple of Imogen, who passed her the Sutra of Empyrean Goddess. After dispersing her cultivation 8 times, Letitia was finally able to become the leader of the Cloud Hall. Letitia was not a particularly strong person. Deep down, she was still like a little girl. Still, she suppressed all of her grievances, fears, and bothersome emotions deep down in her heart, never unloading them in front of anyone. Even in the face of death, she remained calm and composed. Despite possessing this ability to restrain herself, as soon as she saw Zen appear in front of her, she could no longer hold back her feelings and burst into tears. Back when everyone had been fighting for the Dragon Soar Arena, Letitia had fallen in love with Zen. This young man had encroached on her heart. However, at that time, Letitia had had a lot of misgivings in her heart that prevented her from facing her true feelings. Afterward, she had lighted the enchanted lamp and entered the celestial tomb. Although she had obtained a lot of treasures within, Zen had somehow disappeared. Only then did Letitia realize how important Zen was to her. In the following 2 years, she had never heard from Zen even once. Letitia had sent people from Cloud Hall to search the entire central region for him. She even assigned several missions for the purpose. The rewards she had announced if one were to be successful in this endeavor had been shocking. It was said that many disciples of the Cloud Hall shared these missions with other sects. Some disciples of the World Commercial Alliance and the Ethereal Spirit sect participated in these missions to get their hands on these rewards from the Cloud Hall. Because of assigning these tasks, Letitia had been heavily criticized by many Cloud Hall elders. However, Letitia's verbal retaliation always shut them up. It was true that Letitia had offered those rewards herself. Zen's importance to the Cloud Hall was undeniable. Zen was someone who could form the strongest sect protecting array in the central region. For such talent, any sect would treat him the way they treated their ancestors. Cloud Hall had every reason to attach the greatest importance to him. However, no matter how many warriors were mobilized to track Zen, no news about him ever came. Zen seemed to have disappeared in thin air. A year later, Letitia had no choice but to cancel the missions. Even though she couldn't find Zen, Letitia still believed that one day, he would magically appear in front of her. Still, she did not expect him to materialize so suddenly and in such a timely manner. "Are you all right?" Zen asked as he stared at Letitia's fair-skinned, jade-like face. Letitia's eyes were like a pair of pear blossoms bathed in the rain. Gradually, her hammering heart slowed down and she regained her composure. When it occurred to her that she had just lost control of her emotions in front of Zen, her face turned red. Jumping out of Zen's embrace, she pursed her lips and asked, "Zen, where have you been these past 2 years?" Seeing how quickly Letitia recovered and questioned him in a hasty, serious manner, Zen laughed inwardly. He knew that Letitia was self-conscious. Perhaps speaking to him as the leader of the Cloud Hall was more in line with her way of doing things. Zen nodded his head and laughed. "I went somewhere you don't know about." Looking at Zen's mischievous smile, Letitia curled her lips. "Be more serious. Despite being a disciple of the Cloud Hall, you secretly left it. According to the rules here, you must be punished." Hearing this, Lavender, who was not so far away from them, couldn't help but roll her eyes. Compared to Letitia, Lavender was straightforward in her personality. If she were Letitia, she wouldn't have brought such an issue to the fore in front of Zen. It was beyond her understanding why Letitia chose to suppress the true feelings in her heart. Letitia should have just embraced Zen. Suppressing her true feelings would do her no good. In the end, it was her who would suffer. And that would be what she deserves. Lavender thought to herself. To put it bluntly, Lavender was convinced that Letitia had an affected air. What Lavender didn't know was that Letitia had suffered in her experiences too. The growth of these two outstanding women had essentially been very different. It had become Letitia's habit to put a lockdown on her true feelings. Just now, she had been overjoyed, and the torrent of her excitement had broken through what tried to suppress those feelings in her heart. But now that she had calmed down, she returned to usual manner. However, to Zen, Letitia's pretentious manner was somewhat adorable. He continued to smile as he asked, "Then how should I be punished?" Letitia only smiled. "I haven't thought about it yet. I shall let you know when a brilliant idea comes to me." At this moment, Lavender floated over to their side. "Do you need me to give you some suggestions about the punishment?" she asked Letitia. It wasn't that Letitia had not noticed Lavender's presence, but Lavender had been too far away up until now. She didn't pay attention to her movements. Letitia had assumed that the girl was just Zen's sword spirit, but now that Lavender suddenly came into her view and spoke, it shocked Letitia a bit. She looked at Lavender before turning to Zen. "Zen, what has happened to your sword spirit?" Zen only shrugged. "As you can see, there is a soul within my sword spirit. In a certain sense, she is the sword spirit. Her name is Lavender." "Lavender, you're from a different race." Letitia stared at Lavender, a trace of vigilance in her eyes. A long time ago, Letitia had been curious as to why Zen had materialized his sword spirit into such a beautiful woman. This woman, except for her pair of pointed ears, was perfect from head to toe. Even Letitia could not be a match for her in this aspect. Letitia was not so tall, and perhaps not as perfect. Lavender was about the same height as Zen, so Letitia was much shorter than her. Lavender glanced at Letitia indifferently while the latter failed to contain the hostility in her eyes. Letitia had watched Zen enter Cloud Hall and rise rapidly through the cultivation levels. She treated herself as Zen's leader, master, and guide. Moreover, she had fallen in love with him. When another strange woman suddenly appeared beside Zen, even if she was only his sword spirit, Letitia felt skeptical and vigilant. Lavender was of a high stature, so she could see through things very clearly. After living for so many years, she knew more about human nature than both Zen and Letitia. Lavender simply smiled at Letitia's question. "Yes, I come from the Demon Knight. In the central region, there had once appeared ogres and demons, but no one ever encountered members of a race like the Demon Knight." Letitia was understandably unfamiliar with them. Seeing the smile on Lavender's face, Letitia still felt displeased. "Why are you staying with Zen?" she asked her bluntly. Lavender blinked, a trace of mischief flashing in her eyes. "Since you like to suppress your feelings, I'll allow you to suppress them even more," Lavender thought. She giggled and said, "I'm Zen's sword spirit. We are originally one." They were originally one. The words sounded ambiguous, sounding as if Zen and Lavender were lovers. Before Zen had found a new body for Lavender, she had been in the form of the sword spirit, always residing within Zen's body. Technically, what Lavender said was the truth. Letitia frowned and stared at Zen, obviously waiting for him to explain. "Lavender, don't talk nonsense," he said. Then he turned to Letitia. "It's a long story about her. I'll explain it to you later. Right now, you still have to deal with the matters of Cloud Hall." Cloud Hall had just faced a rebellion and Letitia still didn't know about it. Although Zen had suppressed the rebellion in time, Letitia was still required to decide on how to deal with the rebels. Chapter 702. Return to Cloudy City. Cloud Hall. What happened to Cloud Hall? Letitia's eyes widened as she asked. You'll know when we get out, said Zen as he turned around and walked towards the entrance of the Ice Palace. Letitia turned to look at Lavender, but Lavender gave her a meaningful stare in return. It seemed like the two easily understood what each other's look meant. Lavender then turned back into a sword spirit and merged into Zen's body. Like a baby, she huddled herself inside him, her face full of disappointment. The Cyan Dragon noticed this. Stealthily communicating with her, he asked, "Little girl, why the long face? What is bothering you?" Lavender replied coldly, "Stop talking to me." With that, the Cyan Dragon could only let out an awkward smile. The Red Dragon, on the other hand, laughed out loud and said, "I guess our little girl has something on her mind. Don't call me, little girl. You two may be dragons, but you're not in any way older than me." Lavender once again replied coldly. She was almost a world lord in the upper world. Moreover, as a queen of Demon Knight, she was also the spirit totem of the race. Given her seniority, she understandably looked down upon the old dragons in Zen's mind. As she knew what happened in the genuine dragon world, she knew everything about the origins of the 9 dragons. They lived in Zen's mind, while she was Zen's sword spirit. All of them relied on Zen and never really offended each other. But since Lavender was in a bad mood right now, she couldn't help but be a bit rude to them. Warriors don't use time to measure age. That's just what mortals would do. Now you're acting like a willful girl, the Red Dragon continued, as he curled his lips. At this, Lavender decided to just close her eyes and not speak. Her feeling was still running high, and she didn't want to cause any more commotion. Zen was not aware of what was happening in his body. There were many things in it, and they were making his body crowded. In addition to the 9 dragons and Lavender, the black fire in the mysterious furnace also lived there. It also had its own consciousness, but it didn't have high intelligence. Morphins and the 2 other virtual Tribulation Realm elders were still waiting outside the Ice Palace. The scene before them had visibly frightened them. Luckily, Letitia was all right, and it was enough to relieve them. As for the relationship between Letitia and Zen, there was no need for them to guess or ask. They just pretended that they didn't see what had happened. It was a good thing that Letitia didn't know that Morphins and the rest had already entered, because if she did, she would definitely feel burdened. After she walked out of the Ice Palace, she glanced at Morphins and said with urgency in her voice, "Morphins, Zen said that something happened in the Cloud Hall when I was trying to break through to the life and death realm. What was it? Was it serious?" Morphins quickly came over, bowed and said, "Master Ning, when you went through the closed-door cultivation in order to break through to the life and death realm a few days ago, Emmanuel led warriors from Zhou, Fei, Shen and other clans to rebel." What? Letitia's expression changed. She never expected that anyone would stage a rebellion while she was trying to break through to the life and death realm. But then, she had long known that Emmanuel had not been convinced and had been brooding over the fact that she had become the leader of Cloud Hall. Such a thing had never happened in the history of Cloud Hall. But it had to be said, Letitia was indeed too simple-minded and inexperienced to be the leader of Cloud Hall. Other leaders of Cloud Hall wouldn't choose to break through to the life and death realm at this time. But don't worry, Master Ning. The rebellion has already been pacified. Emmanuel was personally killed by Zen, and the rest of the rebels have been captured, Morphins replied. Hearing that, Letitia took a deep breath, and her expression gradually changed into something colder. It seems like those third-grade clans are still not convinced. Well, I will let them know who the leader of Cloud Hall is. Before long, Cloud Hall began to fly towards the direction of Cloudy City. Cloud Hall had always flown above Cloudy City, and only when there were some major events would they leave temporarily. In the city, many warriors from the third-grade clans were looking forward to their return. The rebellion Emmanuel led was deeply supported by many third-grade clans, as the fact that Letitia was now the leader of the Cloud Hall disappointed them very much. The position Letitia was now holding originally belonged to someone from their clans. But now, it had fallen into the hands of someone with another surname, not to mention a little girl at that. How could these third-grade clans possibly take this lying down? Just as Emmanuel proposed to rebel, he quickly obtained the support of all the other third-grade clans. The master of the Fei clan personally took part in the rebellion, but he was killed by Rocher with his sword strike. But what happened in Cloud Hall did not necessarily spread to Cloudy City. After Cloud Hall left the city, any kind of relevant news was completely sealed off. In order to prevent any problems, after Emmanuel opened the enchanted barrier, no martial artists were allowed to enter or leave. Therefore, the news that the master of the Fey clan died and that Emmanuel was killed by Zen after he failed staging a rebellion had yet to spread from Cloud Hall to the city, and so many clans in the city were still unaware of what had happened. "Look, Cloud Hall is back," a warrior from the Zhou clan exclaimed. "It seems like Emmanuel has succeeded. But that jerk Letitia should have already been executed, right?" The one who spoke was a warrior from the Fey clan. He smacked his lips and continued, "What a pity. What a waste for such a beautiful lady to die just like that." But the master of the Shen clan looked worried. Looking up, he said, "But the two stewards of the Cloud School reported back that Zen had visited the Cloud Hall a few days ago. Has Zen really returned? HMPH, Zen. Even if he returns, he might not even be able to enter Cloud Hall. Remember the sect protecting array?" The master of the Shen clan interrupted the speaker in the middle of his sentence, but that was set up by Zen himself, so he must have a way to break through it. Then, the master of the Wu clan spoke up, "And so what if he can break it? Emmanuel led so many strong warriors of the virtual tribulation realm there. How can a young man like Zen be able to contend against them?" But the master of the Shen clan shook his head and said, "I'm just a little worried. I have a bad feeling about this. Don't worry. After our clan takes control of Cloud Hall, all of you will be able to share our success." A warrior from the Zhou clan said proudly. Once Emmanuel succeeded, the Zhou clan would definitely be the biggest beneficiary. As he was speaking, Cloud Hall was already floating in the air above the city. Cloud Hall, which had disappeared for a long time, had once again returned. Because of this, many mortals decided to walk out of their houses and raised their heads to the sky to watch it. Even though these mortals lived in the city and there were countless warriors around them, they didn't show much concern for the disputes, wars and killings that were happening in the world of warriors. In their eyes, Cloud Hall was aloof and exalted. Those who were able to enter Cloud Hall were all deities who had been reborn and were worth everyone's worship. Also, Cloud Hall itself, as a divine place, was the most beautiful scenery in Cloudy City. "Let's go up and meet them," a warrior from the Fey clan said with a laugh. "Let's go. But where is Emmanuel? Don't tell me that he is too lazy to show up now that he has become the master of Cloud Hall." Whoosh! A dozen figures flew towards the Cloud Hall. However, they suddenly felt a strong cold air envelop them halfway through their journey. The cold air contained waves of killing intent that made their hearts palpitate. Fear suddenly was like sharp claws that grasped onto their hearts. Even the dull mortals could feel a great power radiating from Cloud Hall. On the edge of Cloud Hall, there was an independent platform, which extended through a stone pillar that was several feet wide. Letitia was standing on top of the platform. She was wearing a suit of armor made of mysterious ice which had the long feathers of the ice phoenix that were about 30 feet long. They hung down from her back to the bottom of the platform, swaying non-stop in the air, while her straight and well-proportioned legs were pressed together. She looked coldly down at Cloudy City. At the same time, she released her aura, which was as cold as that of any male warrior. This is the aura of a life and death realm warrior. It's Letitia's aura. She has succeeded in breaking through to the life and death realm. Oh no, did Emmanuel fail, or did he not make a move? To everyone, it was very clear that Emmanuel had failed, since Letitia was still standing on top of Cloud Hall. Despite that, they still held on to a sliver of hope in their hearts that Emmanuel hadn't made his move yet. It was this self-deceiving feeling that would arise every time someone was in the face of danger. Chapter 703, Pay in Installments. As the head of Cloud Hall, Letitia already had possession of absolute control over it right after she reached the later stage of the virtual tribulation realm. But being head of the hall was just a nominal title and really didn't mean much. Before being the true leader of Cloud Hall, she had to convince the elders, stewards, and disciples under it with her own strength. Only Imogen was able to rank higher than her in terms of power. Several noble clans had planned things well. They took advantage of the time when Letitia was undergoing her tribulations to make a move, which was nothing short of genius. Because Letitia had chosen to undergo the tribulations at this time, the noble clans had mocked her endlessly as they were plotting against her. As she was still a young lady, although she was gifted with immense power, she wasn't able to figure out what the clans were thinking. Unfortunately for them, Lady Luck was not on their side. Zen was able to show up right on time to save Cloud Hall and Letitia herself. Now that Letitia had reached the life and death realm, it would be hard for anyone, regardless of where they might come from, to rebel. And because of this, the clan masters had mixed feelings. All of them were shocked by Letitia's sudden rise to power. Letitia leaned forward slightly and started to descend. Her long feathers flapped behind her, and she looked like an icy phoenix coming down from the sky. Behind her, Zen, Morphins, and the virtual Tribulation Realm elders all left Cloud Hall one by one and flew towards the place where the warriors from different noble clans were floating in the air. After some time, Letitia suddenly froze in midair. She stared coldly at the clan masters and said, her tone dangerous, Emmanuel has been executed. He's already dead. Now, I wonder how every one of you will explain the rebellion that you tried staging against me. Do not tell me you had no hand in it. Cloud Hall floated above Cloudy City, protecting the steady progress of the noble clans. They used to complement each other, but now, they had become mortal enemies. The clan masters stared at Letitia in a daze, speechless. They had families to support, and many important things were involved and sacrificed in the name of their rebellion. If they were not absolutely sure about victory, they would not have tried to challenge Letitia. But after hearing what Letitia just said, they all had realized that the confidence they had felt towards their plan was just a joke. I know, the fact that I'm the head of Cloud Hall has always been a thorn in your tiny hearts, Letitia said. But I want to say that Cloud Hall does not belong to any of you. It's an independent sect, a 5th grade sect in Cloudy City. Somehow, in the eyes of these clans, Cloud Hall belonged to them. Indeed, in the early days of the Cloud Hall, they had contributed a lot to its development. However, they had forgotten that they were not the only clans admitted in Cloud Hall, as there were a lot of martial artists from other regions. If a sect wanted to flourish, it would not rely on just a few clans, but thousands upon millions of martial artists and countless elites and geniuses. The clan masters were dejected. They didn't even have a chance to escape. All they could do was to resign themselves unto Letitia's orders. As their lives and everything important to them had settled down and had taken deep root in Cloudy City, they wouldn't be able to leave that easily. Moreover, the times had proven to be very chaotic. If they stayed, they would be able to survive under the protection of the Cloud Hall. But if they decided to leave, they would not even have a place that would shelter them from the many lurking dangers. With these running in their minds, the rebellious warriors started bowing their heads one by one. The master of the Shen clan said through his sobs, Master Ning, ask whatever you want me to do for you, and I wouldn't say no. With that, Letitia couldn't help but snort, well then, your 4 clans will be eliminated from Cloud Hall and your families will be exterminated. As soon as Letitia said this, the warriors from the 4 clans started bawling their eyes out. The immediate protests were not only limited to the rebelling warriors. The expressions on the faces of Morphins, Zen, and all the virtual Tribulation Realm martial artists also changed. They never thought that Letitia would be this ruthless. The master of the Shen clan knew that he would face severe punishment from Letitia. Rebellion was unforgivable in any sect. However, he thought that since their 4 clans were the pillars of Cloud Hall after all, she would be lenient towards him and them. Besides, there were countless connections between them and Cloud Hall. Many warriors from their clans were in Cloud Hall as disciples, stewards and elders. Even among the elders standing behind Letitia, some were from the 4 clans, such as Fernandez. Although Fernandez was a member of the Fae clan, he was opposed to the rebellion. In the end, he chose a neutral position and did not want to partake in whatever they were planning. Even if Letitia wanted to punish the rebels, she couldn't really exterminate the 4 clans, because it would involve too many people. However, they had never thought that Letitia would order something so extreme, like their extermination, so directly, so they were greatly shocked. Looking at the stunned expressions of the clan masters, Letitia sneered, so you're afraid now? The master of the Wu clan started to speak, Master Ning. He, however, didn't have the chance to finish whatever he wanted to say as Letitia had already interrupted him. Shut up. When you were planning to rebel, of course you wanted to kill me, exterminate me. Why can't I take your lives today? Oh, I see. You think that I am just a woman who you men think can easily be bullied into submission. Letitia's words hit the nail on the head. They really thought she was just a little girl, and they could bully her into doing whatever they wanted. It was only now that they understood that Letitia was as good as any previous heads of the Cloud Hall. Master Ning, now that the heavenly evil sect is closing in on us, and we are in badly need of talented people. Isn't this too? Morphins intervened, standing up. He was pleading for mercy in behalf of the 4 clans. To be fair, if the 4 clans were to be eliminated, many people would be involved. If Letitia really pushed through with it, the chaos that would engulf the entire Cloud Hall would be unimaginable. Morphans was afraid that Letitia would lose her temper and ignore the bigger picture. However, Letitia sneered and continued, "Morphans, you were right." She then turned to the clan masters and said, "All right then. Today, all your lives are spared. But you have to pay the ransom for the elders who have been captured, 1,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals for each." Of course, Letitia would not do such a stupid thing like exterminating 4 clans. She had predicted that someone would come out and stop her, so she just said something incredibly harsh to scare them. Once Morphans pleaded, she would take his words as an exit and take the opportunity to extort important supplies from them. The combination of such kindness and sternness had a surprisingly good effect. It had to be said that even Zen and Morphans had begun to admire Letitia, as well as Imogen for her incredible judgment. Letitia did have the ability to rule Cloud Hall after all, and it wasn't only due to her sheer power. Upon hearing Letitia's words, the clan masters let out a sigh of relief. However, when they heard that 1,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals were needed to redeem an elder, their faces immediately showed bitterness. A Supreme Life Vitality Crystal was the largest currency in the central region. Even the clan masters only used medium-grade and top-grade Life Vitality Crystals. A Supreme Life Vitality Crystal was equal to 1,000,000 low-grade Life Vitality Crystals. That meant that 1,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals were equal to 1,000,000,000 low-grade Life Vitality Crystals. In order to draw up their sect-protecting array, Cloud Hall had spent several thousand Supreme Life Vitality Crystals, which were almost half of their wealth as they had only had about 10,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals. But the 4 clans were different from Cloud Hall, they all had their own businesses. Under the protection of the Cloud Hall, every year, they would earn a great deal of money. If one person was worth 1,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals, then over 20 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors would cost more than 20,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals. Unfortunately, even if the 4 clans used up their wealth, it would still be very difficult for them to gather enough crystals. "Master Ning, that would be too expensive. Our Wu clan probably wouldn't be able to gather enough crystals," the master of the Wu clan said with a bitter expression on his face. Letitia sneered, "Well, I'm sorry about that. But if there's a will, there's a way. Think of how you can afford that, because if you fail to give me that," Letitia paused and looked directly at the master of the Wu clan, "I will kill all of you." The clan masters exchanged looks. They didn't know what to say. Letitia's move seemed kind, but in fact, she just took this opportunity to collect all the savings that the 4 clans had accumulated over the years. Money was important for warriors. If they didn't have it, it would be hard for them to survive. Seeing the expressions on the clan masters' faces, Zen floated in front of Letitia, smiling. He then said to them, "If you don't have enough money, I have a way to help you." "What's it?" the master of the Wu clan asked as he stared at Zen. Zen said with a chuckle, "You can pay in installments." Chapter 704, Gifts. Cloud Hall's main focus was to bring forth stronger warriors. Its income depended largely on the missions they gave out. A portion of the rewards from the missions would go to the disciples who completed their tasks successfully, but the majority of the benefits acquired during the missions would be in the hands of Cloud Hall. However, despite Cloud Hall's steady completion of its missions, this method of earning money fell behind to that of the large clans. The clans all had their own trades and businesses, some of which extended to mines, banks, escort agencies, and even brothels. The transmission arrays of the Cloudy City were under their jurisdiction as well. Anyone who used the transmission arrays had to pay a considerable sum of money. On top of all this, there were tens of millions of mortals in the Cloudy City. The mortals could not compare with the warriors, and the money they traded with was usually gold and silver. However, if one gathered all of the gold and silver in the city, it would amount to an astronomical sum. Gold and silver could be exchanged into low-grade Life Vitality Crystals, and then into mid-grade Life Vitality Crystals, and would then fall into the hands of the clans. These clans could not afford to take out 20,000 Supreme Life Vitality Crystals in one go. Even Cloud Hall wouldn't be able to do it, but it didn't matter. Zen's plan was simple. The clans could agree to a contract of payment with Cloud Hall. Installments could also be arranged. "Don't forget to pay the interest," Zen said with a smile. At his words, the leaders of the clans shifted in their spots, the corners of their mouths twitching. Letitia was already ruthless enough, and now here was Zen. The younger generation was terrifying. They had cultivated their skills in a pace that had never been seen before, and their talent and strength were more than formidable. And as if that wasn't enough, they were both merciless. The clan leaders understood that it was the price they had to pay. They had risen up in rebellion against the Cloud Hall, but they had failed. This was the consequence of their failure. They had risked in a gamble, and it was time to pay the piper. After some time of discussion, the clan leaders rushed back home to prepare the life vitality crystals. Zen, on the other hand, went straight to Cloud Hall. Until today, he did not have much time to meet up with Roche and the others since he had been preoccupied with worrying about Letadita. Now that he had some time on his hands, he couldn't wait to see them and catch up. In truth, Letitia wanted to stop Zen, but she merely swallowed her words and said nothing. The dull and lifeless expression on the young woman's face did not escape St. Morphin's notice. Letitia's eyes were absent and downcast, and her shoulders drooped like the petals of a wilting flower. He said nothing as he observed her discreetly. It wouldn't be wise for him to get involved in her personal issues. The sound of laughter and cheerful chattering rose from a small pavilion in Cloud Hall. Zen, Roche, Patrick, and Louis gathered together in merriment. On the table were various delicious dishes, and wine flowed like a river. With their cultivation, they didn't need to worry about being intoxicated. Not even 100 buckets of wine could make them drunk. The men had been separated for years, and they were finally all back together. Roche downed all the wine in his cup in one gulp. He wiped the liquid on the corners of his mouth away with his sleeve before saying, "I thought that since I had activated the sword I might be able to win against you. But it seems that I've overestimated myself." He smiled wryly as he spoke. This was indeed Roche. He would never admit defeat. Back at Cloud Sect, Roche had regarded Patrick and Zen as his greatest opponents. He trained day in and day out, determined to defeat them. When he entered Cloud Hall, he was able to gradually surpass Patrick. However, during the martial arts contest in Oracle City, Roche saw just how large the gap was between him and Zen. And it seemed to be larger and larger with the passing of time. Even so, giving up was the last thing on his mind. The knowledge of the difference between him and Zen spurred him like fuel to a fire, and he kept on training to master the heavenly sword that he had cultivated. Finally, Roche had activated the sword eye, and he was able to accumulate the power of the heavens. With this power, his strength had magnified by leaps and bounds. There was no one else in the entire central region who could kill 3 warriors at the virtual tribulation realm with only a single sword strike. But he did it. What was even more frightening was that Roche was only at the middle stage of the internal elixir realm. A warrior at the middle stage of the internal elixir realm was equal to a level 5 or level 6 war general. Even Zen was not able to achieve such a feat when he was at this level. With his newfound power, Roche had felt that he could fight against Zen now. However, Zen was nowhere to be found. For a long time, no one knew his whereabouts. Who would have thought that 2 years later, Zen would appear again, and that he had reached the virtual tribulation realm? It was as if every time Roche took one step forward, Zen leapt 10. The distance between them was only lengthening every time. Roche, don't belittle yourself. You are already strong as it is. If you are able to accumulate enough energy for your sword eye, not even a warrior at the life and death realm would be able to block it, let alone one at the virtual tribulation realm, Zen said with a laugh. But Roche shook his head and said, "I know my own strength. Moreover, there are limited conditions for using the sword eye. I can only strike with it once. In theory, yes, its power would be enough to defeat higher level warriors. But in an actual battle, I would have no time to stab out with my sword for the second time. If the opponent is as experienced as you, he would no doubt be able to dodge my first strike." Even the greatest power had its limits. Roche knew that his heavenly sword was indeed strong, but it had its flaws. There was a reason for the large gap between the strength of a warrior at the life and death realm and one only at the internal elixir realm. As long as his opponent was able to dodge his first strike, Roche would be nothing more than an ordinary warrior at the internal elixir realm. Zen nodded his head at Roche's words. There was no point in being modest, and Roche was a man of pride. It was true when he said that Zen would be able to dodge his first strike. "I can dodge it too," Louis chimed in. He was quite confident in his own body movement skill. Roche threw a cold glance at Louis and sneered, "You can indeed dodge my first sword strike, and then what?" Louis' body movement skill was indeed hard to predict. Even some warriors at the virtual tribulation realm found it difficult to execute it to such an extent. However, rather than be called a body movement skill, it was probably more fitting to be called a running for your life skill. Louis' strength was far inferior to Rocher's. Even if he could dodge the first strike, Rocher would still defeat him in strength. At Rocher's words, Louis immediately fell silent and crumpled back docilely into his seat. On the other hand, a gentle smile appeared on Patrick's face. He was already used to this banter between the two men. By the way, I've come back this time with gifts for you, Zen suddenly said. Gifts? What are they? Louis immediately perked up at the mention of presents as he stared at Zen. There shouldn't be any for you, Rocher coldly stated again. A pitiful look appeared on Louis' face. Why, that wouldn't be fair, he argued. Zen took out a long sword from his space ring. Its blade glinted beautifully under the lights. It was a low-grade sacred weapon. It was not obtained from the genuine dragon world, but was from the Purple Heart sacred place. On the Sea God continent, sacred weapons weren't a rarity. All of the talents of the various races within the Tower of Sin had sacred weapons, but they were all low-grade. A small number of warriors were able to obtain mid-grade sacred weapons, but top-grade sacred weapons were extremely rare. However, in the central region, even low-grade sacred weapons were considered to be of high value, as there weren't many sacred weapons there to begin with. The few low-grade sacred weapons scattered in the region were seen like holy relics. They were practically the most precious treasures of the sects. Warriors even believed that the sacred weapons would bring great fortune to them. Therefore, when Zen took out this low-grade sacred weapon, Rocher's and Louis' eyes widened. Even the normally calm and composed Patrick was not able to hide his shock. Zen, you aren't planning to give this sword to Rocher, are you? That would be too wasteful, Louis said quickly and thoughtlessly. What did you say? Rocher barked at him as faint sword shadows congealed in his eyes. In a flash, Louis' figure disappeared from his original position, and he jumped behind Patrick. I was telling the truth. A sacred weapon would be wasted on you. Why not give it to me instead, Zen? He suggested. Zen, is this one of the gifts you were talking about? Patrick asked with a cautious look on his face. He wondered how Zen could have gotten hold of such a precious item. This sword is for Rocher. It's only fitting for a good swordsman to wield a good sword, Zen explained. He was a swordsman himself, and so he understood the value of a good sword. Rocher closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His eyes opened again and he looked at the long sword with his eyes burning with fervor and admiration. But then, he shook his head and tore his eyes away from the blade. I can't accept this, Zen. A sacred weapon is too precious, he said in a controlled voice, as if his own refusal pained him. Even Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance only had one or two sacred weapons in their possession, and yet Zen was presenting him with one. His heart beat loudly in his chest as he marveled at the sword, but he couldn't accept the gift. It was too valuable. Seeing the conflicted look in Rocher's eyes, Zen smiled and said, Don't turn me down. Sacred weapons are priceless in your eyes, but I don't think so. I want you to have this, Rocher. You don't think so? Louis gaped at Zen, his jaw flung open so widely that it could fall to ground any time. Zen, where have you been these past 2 years? Patrick also stared at Zen, speechless. Zen took out a pair of short swords next. There were 4 short swords in total. Twin swords were sheathed within 2 mother swords. This pair of short swords is also a low-grade sacred weapon. Zen glanced at Louis after he finished speaking. It can't be, for me? Louis asked disbelievingly. His entire body began to tremble as he looked at the swords in Zen's hands. Chapter 705. I'm here for Zen. There were only 3 people in front of Zen, Rocher, Patrick and Louis. Rocher was a swordsman, and he definitely wouldn't be able to use the pair of short swords. Patrick, on the other hand, didn't use a sword at all. The only person who was suitable to use the pair of short swords was Louis. So how could he not be excited when he saw the pair of short swords? Louis was proudest of his movement skill. However, since his cultivation level was low, his movement skill could only be regarded as a method to run for his life if needed. Possessing a pair of short swords like this would make up for his shortcoming in attack. Zen smiled lightly and nodded towards Louis. Louis' hands stretched out like lightning, and even before Zen had the opportunity to give the short swords to him, Louis had taken them away. Zen and Patrick were amused by this reaction, while Rocher cast a reproachful glance at Louis. Patrick was the most composed out of them. He just wore a gentle smile on his face. His cultivation method was mainly focused on Buddhism. Back in the Cloud sect, he was even more powerful than Rocher. However, the Buddhist legacy was not flourishing. The famous Enlightened Heart Temple was barely a third-grade sect. Patrick could only rely on his comprehension to cultivate, and because of that, his cultivation progress became slower than Rocher's. Also because of his cultivation method, Patrick did not use a weapon. Because of that, what Zen had prepared for him was a defensive treasure, which was a low-grade sacred weapon. This defensive treasure, when paired with his body in the diamond-like state, would allow his defensive power to reach an extremely terrifying level. However, even if each of them had a low-grade sacred weapon, they wouldn't dare to use it in front of others. The central region was unlike the sea god continent. It lacked sacred weapons. Only warriors at the life and death realm or at the late stage of the virtual tribulation realm were qualified to possess sacred weapons. And if they were to carry out missions with these sacred weapons, then the primary target of people with bad intentions would most likely be them. While the four of them gathered at where they were, a beautiful woman slowly descended to Cloudy City. Zen had left Margaret in Fire City before he went to Cloudy City. She hesitated for a long while before she finally decided to look for him. She looked soft, like a woman who had never experienced anything hard in her life. Moreover, she didn't look like a warrior at all. But then, it was true that she didn't know much about the rules in the world of warriors, and because of that, she was frequently targeted by a lot of warriors. If Margaret was still the old her, it would have been almost impossible for her to safely reach Cloudy City. But after she fully activated her purple power body, her strength became extremely high. The warriors who had set their eyes on Margaret were out of luck. Originally, they thought she was a weak woman, and even if she had a cultivation at the internal elixir realm, they could still deal with her easily. However, to their surprise, she could summon hundreds of huge swords at the same time, which would cut them into minced meat before they could lament their bad luck. The most exaggerated part of her story happened just the day before when she passed through Goose City. Goose City was originally a very small city. There wasn't even a single sect in its surrounding area. For the past 2 years, the situation in the central region had been very chaotic. As some independent warriors were unwilling to join any big sect or the heavenly evil sect, they started occupying a few small cities and even started forming their own sects. It was just that these small sects were not recognized by the big sects in the central region. Because these independent warriors didn't have to obey the constraints of the large sects, the majority of them weren't good people. Rather than call Goose City a city, it was more accurate to say that it had turned into a nest of bandits, a home for people who robbed warriors passing by. If this was in the past, there would naturally be a 4th grade or even a 5th grade sect that would come forward and exterminate them. With the strength of Cloud Hall or the Ethereal Spirit sect, exterminating these bandits should only be a simple task. But as these large sects were now busy enough with their own affairs, they unfortunately didn't have time to do so. Margaret happened to need to pass by Goose City. Knowing it was a small city, she was prepared to rest for a while before continuing on her journey to Cloudy City. Just like before, wherever she went, there were people eyeing her. Throughout her journey through the city, she had already beheaded dozens of independent warriors from Goose City who were trying something with her. After killing these independent warriors, Margaret decided that she had to leave in a hurry. Although she had killed many people on her way here, she was still not used to this kind of massacre. Everyone said that the world of warriors was cruel, and she herself knew that, but after experiencing it for herself, she understood that this cruelty was almost unbearable. But little did Margaret know that she had brought herself great trouble after killing those warriors. Most of the people in this city were independent warriors. After hearing the commotion, they all rushed over, one by one. Seeing that more and more people were surrounding her, Margaret had no choice but to summon a million huge swords. When a single huge sword was summoned, the power was already so overwhelming. Summoning a million huge swords would be great enough to annihilate the entire city. With over a million swords suddenly slashing people down, the power was almost unimaginable. Soon enough, the entire Goose City had been wiped out by the great swords she had summoned. Tens of thousands of independent warriors had also been wiped out as well. The owner of Purple Power Body truly did have the power to wipe out the world. Seeing this scene, Margaret herself was frightened. After seeing what she had done, she staggered out of Goose City and sprinted towards Cloudy City. Since her flying speed was still too slow, it was only now that she was able to arrive at Cloudy City. The moment she arrived at the gates of Cloudy City, she hesitated to enter. She could not understand why every warrior had wanted to do something to her. After looking around, Margaret found Cloud Hall, which was floating above the city. Zen must be in Cloud Hall right now. After all, he rushed all the way here, she thought. Margaret's eyes flashed as she controlled her life vitality and flew towards the Cloud Hall. However, just as she was flying halfway, she discovered that she seemed to have been obstructed by a transparent enchanted barrier. Is this enchanted barrier the great sect protecting array set up by Zen? She thought. Although Margaret had never left the ethereal city before, she had heard about sect protecting array. She knew about the various sects in the central region, but she lacked the necessary experience that would help her in this situation. When she thought of Zen, Margaret felt conflicted. Taking a deep breath, she started circling around the enchanted barrier and soon enough, she arrived at the main entrance of Cloud Hall. A few guards were standing at the entrance. Upon seeing that there was someone outside, one of the guards flew over and asked her in a stern voice, "Who are you? If you have nothing important to do here, hurry up and leave." After being scolded in such a manner, Margaret couldn't help but feel how she had been wronged. No one, even in the ethereal spirit sect, would dare to scold her like that. But ever since she left the ethereal city, she understood that the world didn't revolve around her, and that no one would treat her like a baby anymore. She had already gone through all sorts of hardships. If she was still the same Margaret as before, she probably would have made the guard pay the price for how he treated her, and there would naturally be people by her side to help her out. But now, she was alone, and had nowhere to go. I'm here for Zen, Margaret timidly replied. Are you looking for Zen? Wait, hasn't he disappeared for a long time? He is not here in Cloud Hall. The guard replied. Although Cloud Hall had been in an uproar for a while, only the middle and upper echelons were involved in it. The guard was just an ordinary warrior of the Cloud Hall, and so he was completely unaware that Zen had already returned. In the past 2 years, there had indeed been many warriors who had come to visit Zen, including people of the Runic Tower. The guard would dismiss them with the same reason. What? Zen is not here? Margaret's expression changed as she frowned deeply. Although Zen had been pursued by Eddie, he still chose to go back to Cloudy City. He had the opportunity to shake Eddie off, so no one else in the central region could block him. It is impossible that Zen hasn't returned to the Cloud Hall. This guard must be lying to me. Margaret thought. Her voice suddenly turned cold as she said, "Don't lie to me. Tell Zen to come out." In her eyes, Zen had told the guard to say that he wasn't there mainly because he didn't want to see her. But she was wrong. But, why did Margaret follow Zen all the way here? Although she already hated Zen to death, she was still a traditional woman. She truly believed that Zen owed her, but at the same time, she didn't know what she wanted to get from Zen. I've already said it. Zen is missing and is not at Cloud Hall. The guard was starting to get annoyed at Margaret. Even though she was at the internal elixir realm, with the enchanted barrier blocking the way, he was not afraid of her at all. Even a warrior at the life and death realm wouldn't be able to break the enchanted barrier. Margaret slowly approached the enchanted barrier. With her expression dark, she shouted, "This is the last time I'll say this. Let Zen out. Tell him to come and see me." "Shut up, you crazy jerk. Go home. You're not going to see Zen here," the guard shouted back as he turned around to return to Cloud Hall's entrance. Chapter 706. What brings you here? Margaret stared at the barrier in a daze as she floated outside of it. No one could decipher what she was thinking about. "Bro, what are you doing? That chick is so beautiful. Why didn't you chat with her more?" the other guard asked when the guard who dealt with Margaret came back. That guard only harumphed at the remark. "Stop making fun of me. She came here looking for Zen. The thing is, it looks like she comes from a noble family, so I don't understand why she came here alone. I'm curious as what Zen has done to her that made her come to Cloud Hall without any backup." Should we inform Master Ning?" the other guard inquired. "I think we should leave it for now. Master Ning has been busy these few days. We just need to watch the door and prevent anyone from entering Cloud Hall," a third guard said. As these guards discussed what was happening with hushed voices, their gazes didn't leave Margaret. Standing guard for Cloud Hall was a tedious job, and they already considered it a treat to lay their eyes on such an elegant and stunning beauty as Margaret. After a short while of having her head down, Margaret raised her head and waved her hand. A crack suddenly appeared in the sky, from which a huge sword quickly descended. It then slashed down towards the barrier of Cloud Hall. Boom! As the huge sword landed on the barrier, an ear-splitting sound erupted. After that, a layer of ripples began to appear on the barrier of light of water. Incredible. The guards were shocked by what just happened. They did not expect a beautiful lady like Margaret would be so daring and directly attack the barrier of Cloud Hall. What happened? One guard exclaimed as he looked at the huge sword that struck the barrier. This jerk doesn't know that the Cloud Hall is a 5th grade sect. By doing what she did, Margaret was only seeking death. Hey, you, stop what you're doing. You do not want to cause any trouble here at Cloud Hall. Take that as an advice. Because if you continue what you're doing, you won't be able to leave even if you want to later. A guard warned Margaret as he started readying himself for a fight. But it was as if Margaret didn't hear any of what the guard said. Continuing her attack, 10 cracks suddenly appeared in the sky and 10 swords came out of them, each one slashing down towards the barrier. Thump, thump, as the swords fell on the barrier like rainfall, their impact immediately increased tenfold. This time, not only did the noise scare the guards, it also alarmed the people who were in Cloud Hall. Soon, 2 stewards at the internal elixir realm rushed out from Cloud Hall's main entrance. With narrowed eyes, they looked at Margaret and asked, their tone scathing, "Who are you and why are you causing trouble here at Cloud Hall?" Margaret stayed silent and just looked at them. This time, she summoned over 100 huge swords. After another glance at the guards and the 2 warriors, she let the swords fall on the barrier. Boom! The power that the 100 swords emanated was terrifying. The water ripples on the surface of the barrier began to look bigger. Margaret's attack was the most ideal way to wear down and even destroy barriers. Such could have a huge impact if a battle between the sects erupted. For example, if she summoned 1,000,000 swords and concentrated them on one target, she would be able to destroy a city. But she could not kill Zen. Then, if so many swords were to fall at the same time during a battle, the opposing sect would probably only have a few top masters left. The rest would all be dead, their bodies nothing but minced meat after the attack. Halt your attacks, or else, you will face immediate death. Do you know where you are? Despite the shouts of the stewards, Margaret didn't stop at all. She still willed thousands upon thousands of swords to descend on Cloud Hall. If these swords were to fall at the same time, their power would be devastating. It would almost have the same power as Eddie's punch. The only difference between them was that Eddie's punch was concentrated at a single point, while Margaret's swords were scattered across the barrier. But as the barrier was designed to scatter the force of an attack and take it as a whole, Margaret's attack was not any weaker than Eddie's punch. As Margaret's attack continued, the surface of the barrier immediately surged with turbulent waves. At the same time, the supreme life vitality crystals that were maintaining it were also beginning to rapidly deplete. Zen had been chatting with Rocher. In the past 2 years, they had experienced a lot of things, and they managed to escape certain death twice. Soon enough, their feelings of relief vanished as they saw violent waves appearing on the barrier around Cloud Hall. Only a warrior at the life and death realm could be able to cause such a thing. Was Eddie already here? Was he attacking the barrier? Zen's expression changed and quickly, he rushed towards the entrance of Cloud Hall. At the same time, Letitia, Morphins and a group of elders from Cloud Hall also rushed outside. Zen, what's going on? Letitia asked Zen as they made their way outside. I'm not sure either. In the central region, only life and death realm masters can cause such an intense reaction to the light of water, Zen said with a cautious look on his face. There were only a handful of life and death realm masters in the central region. However, if it was Eddie, the guards would have already reported it. So who on earth was attacking the barrier? Just as Zen arrived at the Cloud Hall's gate, he saw tens of thousands of huge swords appear out of thin air just outside the barrier. When Letitia, Zen, and Morphin saw the swords, their expressions once again changed. Seeing so many swords falling down onto the barrier, all of them believed that the light of water would soon collapse. Who are you and why are you attacking the Cloud Hall? Letitia shouted angrily, but soon enough, they started to see who was on the other side of the barrier, conducting a full-on attack on Cloud Hall. It was a girl in plain clothes. But just by looking at the oncoming swords, Zen had already felt like he knew who the person outside the barrier was. The swords reminded him of Marilyn. He then looked outside, and there she was, Margaret. His expression changed drastically. After a few moments of awe, he immediately roared at Margaret, "What are you doing? Stop it right now." When Margaret heard Zen's voice, all of the swords stopped midair. As she saw that the one who spoke was indeed Zen, a smile quickly appeared on her lips. But then, when she saw Zen's angry expression, her face immediately became gloomy. This man had never been nice to her, and she felt that he would never, ever be. With a flick of her finger, all the swords disappeared into thin air. Letitia had already planned to make her move. She wanted to kill this attacker before any other sword landed on the barrier. She didn't care who this girl was. Anyone who dared to destroy the barrier around the Cloud Hall would face the wrath of death. Although the swords were powerful enough that they could destroy the barrier around the Cloud Hall, they wouldn't be able to hurt Letitia. If she decided to, she would have enough time to get around them and find a gap to kill whoever the attacker was. However, after hearing Zen, the attacker suddenly stopped. That surprised Letitia greatly. Then, she wondered whether Zen knew the girl. Margaret bit her lips, stared at Zen and said in a hushed voice, "Finally, you're willing to come out to meet me. What, if you really want to see me, why didn't you just let the guards inform me?" Zen said as he continued to glare at Margaret. "How could you be this stupid?" Then, Margaret pointed at the guards, her lips pouted. "But they told me that you were not here in the Cloud Hall. I thought you were just hiding. I thought you were just not willing to see me." Zen turned around and glared at the guards. Scared, the guards immediately explained the misunderstanding with an apologetic face. "Sir, we didn't know you were back. We thought you were still in a distant land, and so we told her that." The guards were more than scared. If the barrier of Cloud Hall had been destroyed because of this incident, they would be severely punished. With that, Zen snorted. He then stared back at Margaret and asked, "What brings you here?" The others were also curious. Why was this woman looking for Zen? Margaret thought for a while and then shook her head. "I don't know either." Morphins and the few elders looked at each other and tittered. They had lived for so many years and could roughly guess that Zen played the field outside, so the girl came after him. Not long ago, Morphins had witnessed a scene where Zen was hugging Letitia. He had no idea how things would end today. Of course, the one who had to solve the problem definitely wasn't them, but Zen. Letitia looked at Margaret, her face full of conflicting emotions. Then she asked, "Are you the young lady from the Shi clan?" Margaret summoned so many huge swords, just like Marilyn did when she confronted Zen a few years ago. So Letitia guessed that Margaret possessed a purple power body. But then, she noted how she was only at the primary level of the internal elixir realm, yet she could already summon so many swords. Obviously, she was much stronger than Marilyn. Currently, there were only 3 purple power bodies in the central region, 2 of which were in Eddie's hands. Since the third one was Xander's great-granddaughter, Letitia had made such a logical conclusion. As Letitia had guessed her identity, Margaret nodded and said, "Yes, I am Margaret Shi." She thought the others would show her respect once she made herself known. However, Letitia just looked at her with a weird expression and asked, "You don't know why you're looking for Zen, but why did you come to the Cloud Hall for him?" Chapter 707, Being Jealous. As a woman, Letitia was very sensitive about that sort of matter. It was a rather sore subject for her. Looking at Margaret straight in the eyes gave her a glimpse of the truth. Due to her engrossment in the Cloud Hall, she had not been able to make the time to talk to Zen comprehensively. What had happened in the past 2 years? Why did he come back? What happened in Mist's celestial tomb? After she was done with work, she planned to have a talk with Zen. The young lady of the Shi clan suddenly came to the Cloud Hall that time to look for Zen. Baffled, she wondered if something had happened between the two. Some time ago, Letitia had heard about Margaret, the young lady of the Shi clan, and even suggested that the ethereal spirit sect get her married as soon as possible. The young lady had the purple power body. So, if she was to be caught by Eddie, the consequences were grave. Even Yan could get in trouble under such circumstances. How did she get acquainted with Zen? Did she follow him to the Cloud Hall? Upon hearing Letitia's words, Margaret couldn't help but feel a little humiliated. Although she had a terrible temperament and was headstrong, she was a lady from a noble clan after all. Those kinds of things were embarrassing to be discussed in front of so many people. The expression on Margaret's face added confusion to Letitia, who was already mentally guessing the kind of relationship the two had. In a low voice, Letitia spoke, "Remove the enchanted barrier and let her in." Under Letitia's command, the enchanted barrier in the Cloud Hall was instantly removed. After Margaret got inside, the enchanted barrier covered the Cloud Hall again. The young lady flew straight towards Zen when she saw him. Stunned at that certain moment, Zen had no clue how to react. When they were in the underground palace, Zen had acted on his rage instead of being careful. Also, Eddie and Simon were nearby and very eager to find them. Zen was afraid Eddie might take Margaret away. If that happened, all perdition could break loose. Ultimately, he chose to take away that woman's virginity energy instead. Although Zen's intentions were reasonable, he was undeniably being unfair to Margaret. Besides, it was inevitable for Margaret to be considered as the first woman in Zen's life. Ignoring the glances she was getting from the others, Margaret floated over and leaned against Zen with her head lowered, almost like a child who had done something wrong. When she witnessed such affection right before her, Letitia's face hardened. Anger filled her heart. However, as the leader of the Cloud Hall, she did not dare express her jealousy. Letitia handled her emotions quite well. Forcefully, she suppressed her displeasure and allowed a faint smile to appear on her face. Through gritted teeth, she asked, "Miss Shi, may I know why you followed Zen to the Cloud Hall?" The other elders, including Morphans, exchanged glances. Based on the sudden change in Letitia's expression, they all understood what she really felt at that particular time. Since Zen was a member, it was only appropriate for him to bring Margaret into the Cloud Hall. In addition, Letitia had already confirmed that Margaret was indeed the young lady of the Shi clan who possessed the purple power body. No wonder why she could summon numerous giant swords. That time, the heavenly evil sect was wreaking havoc in the north. It was their duty to let Margaret temporarily stay in the Cloud Hall and protect her. In that case, it was a question why Letitia had to ask her purpose of coming there. Needless to say, she was indeed very jealous of Margaret. Anger became a little more obvious on Letitia's face. She was like a volcano, ready to erupt at any given minute. The Cloud Hall elders decided it was better if they just left. So, silently, they all retreated back to their safe place. "I've already had nowhere else to go," Margaret replied. A war was happening between the ethereal spirit sect and the heavenly evil sect. And the heavenly evil sect had managed to destroy the transmission arrays. Thus, Margaret wasn't able to receive any kind of update yet. It was obviously dangerous for her to return to the ethereal city. "Why did you follow Zen?" Letitia asked again, staring at Margaret intently. The way she was staring alarmed Margaret a great deal. Letitia had also asked the same question again and again. Not answering her, Margaret asked, "You're the leader of the Cloud Hall, right?" "I am," Letitia replied. Pursing her lips, Margaret uttered, "I am willing to follow and stay with Zen wherever he is." As the leader of the Cloud Hall, why must you ask about such personal matters? After being questioned back by Margaret, Letitia was left speechless. True enough, Letitia wasn't to meddle with such matters despite the fact that she was the leader of the Cloud Hall which Zen belonged to. Even if she had the greatest ability to control the mysterious Luna Hall, she didn't have the right to interfere with whatever was really going on. It was between Zen and Margaret. She was in no place to pry. A look of isolation appeared on Letitia's face. Glancing over to Zen, she sighed, "You're right. I should not ask about those things. Zen, she has the purple power body, so it should be made sure that she isn't taken away by Eddie. Let her stay here for the time being." After saying that, Letitia turned around and left. Zen felt extremely uncomfortable and gloomy about Margaret and Letitia's interaction. It seemed that Letitia didn't have a clue what happened, nor did she know he took Margaret's virginity energy away. Suddenly, rays of red light leaked out and lavender emerged from Zen's body. Feeling a little unhappy the past few days, the current exchange between the women perked her up. Staring at Letitia as she left, Lavender said softly, "She hasn't even found out," but her reaction was already major. How much more if she knows the actual truth? Of course, Margaret knew what Lavender meant by the actual truth. Her face flushed. A bitter look appeared on Zen's face. To him, dealing with that kind of matter was just as difficult as fighting against Eddie. It amused Lavender how Letitia managed her feelings during her contact with Margaret. Back when Margaret was left alone in the Fire City, Zen did not think much about it. He knew that he was in trouble because of her. At that time, Zen tried to shake off Eddie's pursuit in hopes to get rid of trouble. Now that Margaret had come to the Cloud Hall to look for Zen, how was he going to deal with things? "I'll arrange a place for you to stay first. Follow me," he said, pulling a long face. He then went with Margaret to find a steward of the Cloud Hall to assist them. There were many female disciples in the Cloud Hall. Those who had been promoted to the Cloud Hall from the iridescent sect were mostly women. Thus, it wasn't difficult to arrange a place for Margaret to stay. However, they had no idea how to cater to her as time went by. What kind of relationship could she have had with Zen? Even Zen was uncertain of that. Perhaps, he had already methodically planned his own path for martial arts, but in relationships, Zen was in shambles. Unlike Zen, Margaret had a clearer outlook on things. The place that Zen had arranged for Margaret was quite decent. At least, it was much better compared to the living places of the other female disciples. However, Margaret still couldn't get used to it. Ever since she was young, the environment of the place she had lived in for most of her life was always carefully selected, from the size, height and even the materials used for her bronze mirror that hung on the wall, up to the positioning of the bed and the materials of her pillows. Considering her current circumstance, she was being favored. However, it was still impossible for her to get some sleep. Sitting upright on the bed, Margaret wrapped her arms around her knees, staring blankly at the dark sky outside the window. A smile suddenly appeared on her face. Even if she wasn't used to this sort of life, she was determined to endure for the sake of Zen. This picky and stubborn young lady seemed to have found a great, noble reason for completing a difficult task. If anyone else were to know that the somewhat simple and crude environment of the Cloud Hall actually caused Margaret to feel very morose and disappointed, they would be surprised. On that very night, she was not the only one awake. In the Ice Palace, Letitia continued reinforcing her cultivation base. Having just entered the life and death realm, she needed some time to tend to her life vitality. Being in the life and death realm could liquefy one's life vitality. Only after she reached the Soul Sea realm was she able to have a space to transform her life vitality into the Soul Sea. By then, she could create a world inside her. Although Letitia was cultivating in peace, she felt extremely agitated. From time to time, the words that Margaret uttered flashed through her mind. She wondered if she had the right to ask Zen about Margaret. Chapter 708. The Bad News. When the life vitality was condensed at its maximum, it would slowly liquefy. For the life and death realm warriors this was a very smooth process. But tonight Letitia just couldn't get the hang of it. Her mind was distracted, she couldn't focus on her tasks as she kept failing. It was very dangerous for her to cultivate in this state of mind. Anything could go wrong in the martial arts cultivation and she could get seriously injured. Most warriors would choose to stop cultivating under such circumstances until their minds were in the right place again. However, Letitia was very persistent, and while her mind was wandering she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. She lost control of a strand of life vitality which suddenly charged up. As this small wisp of life vitality got out of control, it caused the rest of the life vitality in her belly to become erratic. Letitia tried to calm herself down and stabilize her life vitality with slow and steady breathing. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The life vitality shot upwards uncontrollably, piercing through her elixir field. She felt the taste of blood in her mouth. She spat it out, realizing that if a wisp of life vitality had penetrated her elixir field it would cause damage to her belly. The elixir field was also the core and most fragile part of a warrior's body, and it would still be severely destroyed even after being partly damaged. Letitia tried to control the life vitality in her belly as she swallowed the pills. Slowly she started to feel better. The pills had taken effect but didn't change her complexion. Her face was still as pale as before. Letitia decided to stop cultivating for a while because she was not able to focus on her tasks. She walked to the window and looked at the bright moon and noticed there were just a few stars in the sky. Suddenly, she noticed that one of the stars had a peculiar orange glow. What kind of star is that? Letitia frowned. She could feel that the light from the star was coming from far away and was shooting towards the Cloud Hall. It seemed like someone in the Cloud Hall had triggered the power of the star. She wondered how this was possible. In astonishment she decided to get closer. Her body gently floated from ground and suddenly disappeared from the Ice Palace. Zen did not overthink things like Letitia and Margaret. Right now he focused on releasing his perception into the universe to communicate with the stars. He had tried many times to communicate with the stars before but failed almost every time. On his first attempt, however, he had been successful. But failing for so many times had affected him. Compared to other cultivation methods, the transcendent divine might was much more difficult than he had imagined. Tonight, Zen's consciousness successfully activated a star. It was a beautiful orange star. It irradiated a gentle and calming glow. Most importantly, it didn't resist Zen at all. With every extra star activated, the power of the stellar body became stronger. There was still a gap between Zen's strength and Eddie's. Even though they hadn't fought each other, Zen believed his strength would match Eddie's very soon. If he continued to activate stars, it would not be long before he could kill Eddie. While he was practicing the stellar body, Zen's body was covered in a layer of faint purple light, which was the same light that covered a purple star he had already activated. That was his first star. Now, Zen had successfully activated a second star and became covered by its orange light. As the two different lights intertwined with each other, a layer of magical colorful light appeared around Zen's body. Letitia was observing Zen standing on the roof from afar. "It's really him," she muttered. She wondered how Zen was able to absorb the power of the stars. Maybe he studied a powerful cultivation method she hadn't heard about. Now that she knew it was Zen who triggered the power of the star, she became even more curious. Looking at Zen's thin face from afar, Letitia sighed with emotion, her head deep in her thoughts. In just 2 years this young man had stepped from the illuminating soul realm to the virtual tribulation realm. Even though Zen was only in the early stage of the virtual tribulation realm, he had killed Emmanuel who was no match for him. Letitia was afraid that Zen's strength was growing strong too fast, matching hers quickly. She also guessed that he might have suffered a lot in the past 2 years. Letitia really wanted to approach Zen and talk to him. She suddenly thought of Margaret and held back her impulses. She sighed and sadly murmured, "I'd better talk to him next time. It doesn't feel like the right time." Then she quietly retreated into the darkness. The next morning, Margaret paced back and forth in front of Zen's room. When Zen appeared, she looked at him with a smile. Margaret had suffered through intense changes. She now seemed to be a completely different person. In the past, Margaret was arrogant and had a commanding attitude towards everyone. But now, whenever she met him, she would become a completely different person. Perhaps, in her heart, she was thinking of Zen as the one she could stay with and rely on for the rest of her life. Zen, however, didn't seem to think the same. After seeing Margaret, Zen quickly glanced at her and kept on walking towards the depths of the Cloud Hall. If it wasn't for what had happened in the underground palace, Zen would have chased Margaret away. He had already left her behind once in the Fire City, so now he couldn't do it again. All he could manage was to try and tolerate her as long as he had to. Feeling Zen's indifference, Margaret pursed her lips. She didn't feel angry nor mad at him. Instead, she smiled in a silly, almost childish way and followed Zen. She knew Zen didn't like when she talked a lot, so she just kept quiet. As they arrived at the meeting hall of the Cloud Hall, they could hear the whispering voices of all the elders that had arrived earlier. "It is a tragic situation. Eddie has gone mad. He even killed those mortals who can't cultivate. Those independent warriors are not good people at all. They are just a rabble. They would kill everyone without mercy given the opportunity. It's a pity that the innocent warriors who stayed in the ethereal city had to endure such danger." All voices went silent as soon as Zen and Margaret stepped into the room. As Zen walked in, Morphins approached him as if about to say something, but fell quiet as soon as he saw Margaret. "What's going on?" Zen asked when he saw the hesitating expression on Morphins's face. "The ethereal spirit sect has been attacked by the heavenly evil sect." Morphins finally responded. The news wasn't a surprise to Zen, but he couldn't help but frown his eyebrows in anger. Margaret, however, was astonished at hearing this. Zen had teamed up before with the septuplets of ethereal spirit to set up a trap to kill Eddie. They never expected that Eddie would be so strong. His true strength was beyond their imagination and the attempt was a complete failure. Now, since Eddie and Simon, who were life and death realm warriors, were the leaders of the heavenly evil sect, it was only a matter of time before the heavenly evil sect destroyed the ethereal spirit sect. After all, it was difficult for Xander of the ethereal spirit sect to resist their attack on his own. In truth, the ethereal spirit sect had been attacked and destroyed for quite some time. However, since the transmission arrays had been damaged, it took a long time to spread the news out from the ethereal city. Until today the Cloud Hall members had no idea of its destruction. Margaret stood blankly without moving and looked at Morphins. "Then, what about the ethereal city? Is there any news about the ethereal city?" Morphins looked at Zen. "Please tell us the truth," Zen said deeply. "In order to repay those independent warriors, the heavenly evil sect destroyed the entire ethereal city and the city members have been massacred. The entire city has been plundered and the top 7 noble clans were exterminated," Morphins spoke frankly. "The 7 noble clans? Are you sure that all the 7 noble clans have been exterminated?" Margaret asked with a trembling voice. There were 7 influential third-grade clans in the ethereal city, namely the Lin clan, the Huang clan, the Chong clan, the Shu clan, the Shao clan, the Chen clan, and the Shi clan. The Shi clan occupied a leading position among the top 7 noble clans. Margaret didn't dare ask directly about the Shi clan. It was too painful to even think about the destruction of the noblest clan. Aware of what she meant, Morphins went straight to the point. The She clan has also been attacked. I've heard that the She clan was their major target and that the heavenly evil sect wouldn't rest until they were all gone. All members of the She clan have been slaughtered, and the She clan's castle has been burned to the ground. Margaret couldn't believe it. Her legs felt weak and she felt like she was about to faint after hearing Morphin's words. She knelt on the floor and stared in the distance with two glassy eyes. Streams of tears flowed down her face. She never believed such a large ethereal spirit sect could be attacked and destroyed so easily. In Margaret's eyes, her great-grandfather, Xander, was invincible. The ethereal spirit sect had existed for tens of thousands of years and it was known as the top sect in the world. Now it had been completely destroyed. It was gone just like that. The elders of the Cloud Hall couldn't help but shake their heads while seeing the miserable, helpless expression of that young lady. Suddenly Letitia also walked in the hall and coldly announced, "I just received news that a group of She clan members is on its way to our Cloud Hall now." The She clan, that means that there are survivors. Hearing Letitia's words, Margaret felt hope again, and showed a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. Letitia replied, "Yes, they will arrive today. I might need your cooperation this time." "Cooperation? What do you mean?" Margaret asked again. Letitia felt that her answer would be too cruel. So she decided to let Margaret face the facts and accept the situation when the time was right. She said flatly, "You will know as soon as they arrive here." Chapter 709, Exchange. The fall of the ethereal spirit sect was a piece of grave news for all of Central Region. The heavenly evil sect had emerged victoriously in the siege of Ethereal City, completely annihilating its entire population through a direct massacre. Before the city's siege, all the martial artists had left to fight and protect the ethereal spirit sect. Only a few warriors remained and the majority of the people within the city were ordinary, non-martial artist residents. The sect battle did not concern them too much. The result of the fight between the ethereal spirit sect and heavenly evil sect would only serve to change the banners that hung on their city's walls. The winning sect would rule Ethereal City and they were willing to blindly follow. They were so sure that they wouldn't be touched by the war outside their walls. How wrong their assumptions all were. The heavenly evil sect had no need for blind followers. After the breach of the city gates, the independent warriors that comprised of Eddie's forces immediately set out to burn and pillage everything in sight. They left nothing and no one behind. The Cloud Hall's elders, upon receiving the news, naturally felt depressed and hopeless. Zen felt pity especially for Margaret with the drastic change that this piece of news entailed for her. A steward entered the meeting hall to report. "The She clan of Ethereal City requests a meeting," he announced. "Let them enter Cloud Hall and bring them to me," Letitia ordered. Margaret quickly wiped her tears away. Just how many of their people survived? Did Brent survive? How about her father? Not long after, several people entered the meeting hall. The one in the lead wore the black robe of the ethereal spirit sect. He clasped his hands in "Greetings, Master Ning." Margaret swept her gaze at the newcomers but could not find the ones she was looking for. "Didn't they say that the She clan would come? You're all elders of the ethereal spirit sect. Where are the members of my clan? Where's my father? Where are my uncles? Where is Brent, Jacob?" She was right. The ones in front of them were not members of the She clan but were instead members of the ethereal spirit sect. The one in front was Jacob Chu, a member of the ethereal spirit sect who had a good relationship with the She clan. He had managed to reach the virtual tribulation realm in his 30s and would be soon promoted as an elder. He was also one of Margaret's pursuers. Once, for her birthday, he scoured all of Central Region's mountains to gather radiant light grass seeds as a present. He strung all the precious seeds together and gave it to her as a bracelet. Margaret did not find his gift pleasant or endearing and immediately threw it on the ground. It made him extremely angry, but he could not do anything for the sake of the sect leader. Now, he stood in front of her as a survivor of the ethereal city's siege. He gazed up coldly at her. "The entire She clan was exterminated and your father was killed. Brent is also missing, all because of you." His words shook Margaret to the core. What are you talking about?" She stuttered. "Because of me. What did I do? If it weren't for you, the heavenly evil sect wouldn't have attacked in the first place. Eddie did not desire the sect's inheritance. What he truly wanted was you." Jacob snorted cruelly. "No, that's not true," Margaret screamed, crying even harder. Jacob scoffed. "I'm telling the truth," he said, ignoring her tears. "If you hadn't refused to marry someone, the heavenly evil sect might not have taken the ethereal spirit sect by surprise." Truth be told, Jacob enjoyed seeing Margaret fall so hard from grace. Jacob was a proud person. He was a heaven-level talent and was considered an outstanding warrior. Before Brent came, Jacob had been the #1 talent of the ethereal spirit sect. However, Margaret's rejection years ago completely disgraced him and reduced him to a laughingstock. Now that both the She clan and ethereal spirit sect were ruined, he knew that there was no way she could continue being arrogant in front of him. No, you're lying. It's not because of me. The thought of having brought disaster to the She clan, the ethereal spirit sect, and the entire ethereal city, the pressure wasn't something that Margaret felt she could handle. Her mind was in shambles and all she could do was to repeatedly deny Jacob's words. Zen stood at the side and was mildly panicking. Margaret seemed to have reached her breaking point, but he didn't really know what to do. Jacob, however, continued to sneer, "Our leader has fallen into Eddie's hands. Eddie wants you as an exchange. My great-grandfather isn't dead. You want to trade me for him?" Margaret asked in disbelief. "Yes, this is the only thing you're good for," Jacob told her harshly. Even if the ethereal spirit sect had been destroyed, it could be always rebuilt through Xander's powers. However, his overall strength would have been greatly reduced, so the sect, which originally had a 5th grade status, would be demoted to 4th grade. The only way to get him back, however, was for Margaret to go into Eddie's arms. This was the reason why Jacob and the rest of the sect came into Cloud Hall. "To get my great-grandfather back," Margaret repeated, nodding her head dumbly. However, as she repeated these words, something seemed to have crossed her mind and her body suddenly trembled. "No," she screamed. "No, I can't do it." "How can you refuse such a critical decision?" Jacob asked, pressuring her further. Margaret shook her head and began to cry. "No, I really can't do it. Please, I can't. It's not up to you. You have no choice," Jacob screamed, reaching out to grab her arm. Deep inside, he had a secret plan. Sure, they could use Margaret to get Xander back, but would that really solve everything? What was the use in rebuilding the ethereal spirit sect? The heavenly evil sect might be the ruler of the world in the future. It would just be a waste to surrender Margaret to Eddie. Jacob had been infatuated with her for a long time and now had the perfect opportunity to make her his. Her purple power body was also a bonus. Margaret's powers would be extremely beneficial for him and, after he had sex with her, he could leave Central Region and settle down somewhere far, far away. However, just as he reached Margaret, Zen had stepped forward to block his way. "I'm afraid she can't do that," Zen muttered. Jacob frowned. "This is a matter of the ethereal spirit sect. Who are you to interfere?" Zen sneered at Jacob's words. "First of all, Margaret isn't a member of the ethereal spirit sect. She's a member of the She clan and you, if I'm not mistaken, aren't really surnamed She. Secondly, if you give Margaret to Eddie, all the warriors of the world would suffer. Most importantly, it would indirectly harm my sister." "Are you Zen Luo?" Jacob asked, though, judging by his tone, he was pretty sure he was Zen. Zen nodded in confirmation. "Even so, we must save our leader," Jacob insisted. "Yes, we need to rescue our leader first. Zen, our leader's life is more precious than your sister's. Your sister will only lose her virginity. Eddie might not kill her." "Agreed. The lustful demon array is also good for girls. She won't suffer anyway," a warrior of the ethereal spirit sect chimed in. Zen was quick to pin him down. "Your leader is very important to you, huh?" he said viciously. "To me, my sister is the most important, while your leader is worthless. Do you understand?" Without any warning, Zen dealt a hard punch to the warrior's chest. The warrior was already at the virtual tribulation realm but couldn't withstand a single blow from Zen. The punch sent him flying through the air and crashing onto the meeting hall's wall. The expressions of the members of the ethereal spirit sect instantly darkened. "You're being unreasonable," Jacob shouted in anger. "Is this how you bully others?" Letitia and the elders of Cloud Hall remained silent, while Zen sneered at Jacob. He had no plans wasting his time to reason with a warrior. To him, his sister's safety had always been the top priority. Margaret felt her heart flutter at Zen's actions. He had defended her at such a critical moment and she was thankful. Also, she had realized that she no longer had any reason to retreat. Her back straightened as she glared at Jacob. Actually, Zen also has a third reason. Zen knew just what she was about to say, but the words were already out before he could even stop her. "I'm no longer a virgin." Chapter 710. Admit it. To admit such a thing in public made Margaret's cheeks instantly blush. The expression on the faces of the elders of Cloud Hall grew even weirder as they all turned to look at Zen. Jacob and the rest were stunned. If Margaret was indeed telling the truth, then she would no longer have any value to Eddie. Ha ha, Margaret in the She clan's castle, you acted as if you were a holy virgin. I didn't expect that you had already fooled around with some loser. Since Margaret was no longer a virgin, Jacob's plan was naturally foiled. He felt extremely resentful. For the longest time he had boasted that he would not lose to any man, but this woman did not even bother to look at him. He's not some loser, Margaret replied defensively as she stared at Jacob. Then who is he? Letitia asked, curiosity getting the best of her. Actually, this had nothing to do with her, and only had something to do with the She clan and ethereal spirit sect. So when Letitia decided to chime in and ask specifics, it made her look like a gossip. However, Saint Morphans and the other elders of the Cloud Hall had already guessed that the man Margaret was talking about was most likely to be Zen, and that was the main reason why Letitia suddenly became so concerned about the topic. But as for the ethereal spirit sect's elders, they were still very confused as to what was happening. They looked at Letitia with strange expressions on their faces and thought, why is this woman prying into something that doesn't involve her? At this point, Zen suddenly said openly, it's me. The moment he said that, the entire meeting room suddenly became silent. Margaret is already my woman, he continued. And because of that, I can't let you take her to Eddie. Zen was not trying to hide the fact that it was him who took Margaret's virginity, but he was embarrassed to admit it in front of Letitia. However, since things had come to this point, he couldn't deny it any longer and he had to shoulder the consequences of what he had done to Margaret. When Letitia heard Zen confess, she couldn't help but cast her eyes down, avoiding eye contact with him. Just last night, she was on the edge of spiraling into madness. Her face was already deathly pale then, but now, her face was completely devoid of color, as pale as death. Gentlemen, I think it's better if we adjourn this meeting. We still don't have a good way to save your sect leader, and I don't think we'll have one if we continue, Zen said. Jacob gritted his teeth as he glared fiercely at Zen. As much as he wanted to, he could not take Margaret away forcefully, as he was on someone else's territory. The leader of Cloud Hall was here, and Zen's strength was also unfathomable. Taking Margaret away against Zen's will was simply a death wish. Moreover, in this situation, even if he could take Margaret away, it wouldn't mean much as apparently, she was not a virgin anymore. The warriors of the ethereal spirit sect didn't linger for too long and quickly left. After they left, the meeting hall immediately became silent. Margaret lowered her head and slowly leaned against Zen. To her, he was her only source of strength and support. Zen, on the other hand, looked at Letitia and asked with concern, are you not feeling well? It's nothing, Letitia replied coldly. Turning around to address the elders of Cloud Hall, she tried her hardest not to have any eye contact with Zen. Elders, do you have any other matters or concerns to go over today? The group of elders was secretly scrutinizing Letitia's expression. Each and every one of them clearly knew that if anyone wanted to say anything at that moment, they would only be asking for trouble, so they simply didn't say anything. Cloud Hall had already received the news of the war that had been started by the heavenly evil sect. They should have discussed that situation with each other. There were simply too many things that needed to be talked about and decided on, but this was not the right time to discuss anything with Letitia. If there's nothing else, we can discuss things another day. After Letitia said that, she quickly left the meeting hall without looking back, as if she had forgotten the existences of Zen and Margaret. The elders looked at each other before following her out of the meeting hall. As those events unfolded, Margaret sensed that there was something wrong. She carefully asked Zen, your sect leader's expression was so gloomy. What happened to her? But then Zen's expression was gloomy as well. How was he going to explain what had happened to her? After taking a deep breath, Zen indifferently gazed at Margaret. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand to touch her black hair that was draped over one side of her shoulders. Nothing, he said with a smile. Margaret sighed and once again snuggled up to him meekly like a little cat, allowing Zen to stroke her hair. Despite his words, she still felt that something was wrong. Zen never relaxed ever since he returned to Cloud Hall. For him, being back was an opportunity he needed to seize to further cultivate. He had always felt that time was running out for him. It was almost certain that there would be a fight between him and Eddie, and by the looks of how the heavenly evil sect was developing, it seemed that its next step was to deal with Cloud Hall or the World Commercial Alliance. For the Heavenly Evil Sect, only Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance in the entire central region would be able to stop them from developing. After wiping out those two great sects, the Heavenly Evil Sect wouldn't have to worry about other sects like Mysterious Luna Hall, Bloodwood Cliff, or Black Mountain Sect. Zen wasn't the only one who felt a sense of urgency, as the whole Cloud Hall felt an atmosphere of tension. The Ethereal Spirit Sect had already been wiped out. Warriors of Cloud Hall felt that they needed to get ready, as anything could happen at any time. Not many disciples accepted the missions distributed by Cloud Hall during this period of time, and the vast majority of them started to cultivate more intensely behind closed doors in order to break through their bottlenecks. They were doing this in order to at least have something to protect themselves with once the Heavenly Evil Sect officially launched a war against Cloud Hall. But other than this tense atmosphere, there was also a strange atmosphere that was permeating within Cloud Hall. Of course, only the elders could feel this. Letitia's temperament suddenly became erratic and strange. As long as Zen was around, she would either not say a word or immediately turn around and leave. She seemed to commit herself to completely ignoring him, and the relationship between the two of them seemed to have dropped to a level worse than being strangers to each other. Many elders were discussing this matter behind the backs of the people concerned. Zen has made such a great contribution to Cloud Hall. By now, he has already stepped into the virtual tribulation realm and is unfathomably powerful. He will be an indispensable weapon for Cloud Hall when the Heavenly Evil Sect finally decides to attack. Because of that, the sect leader shouldn't be treating him like this. Alas, the leader is still too young. She can't act based on her emotions. Logically speaking, when Zen returned, he should have been conferred the position of an elder. His contributions have been more than enough. Young people can never escape from love. The leader loves Zen so much, and she must be feeling very sad right now. You know what, now that I've thought about it, it's extremely normal for a man to have several women. As an appointed leader, she can't deal with this matter in the way she's dealing with it now. Right, while the few elders were discussing the matter in private, Letitia floated out from the corner like a ghost. Her complexion was as pale as a corpse, and her cold eyes were fixed on the elders as she asked, "What are you talking about?" The elders were shaken up. They didn't expect her to be there. No, nothing, they just muttered in unison, avoiding her gaze. Letitia slowly blinked her eyes. As days passed, she looked more and more ghostly, and it was obvious that she had lost a lot of weight. Without the energy to spare to argue, she just drifted away quietly. After she had left, the elders stroked their chests, sighed, and said, "This won't do. Let's find Morphins and have him talk to her. She needs some sense drilled into her." In comparison, Margaret was thriving and her days seemed to get better and better every day. Although she couldn't help but feel sad when she thought of the things that happened in Ethereal City, in the end, she still found her home here. Even though she knew in her heart that Zen might not be that fond of her, she still treated him as her husband. Because of this, Margaret was now like a completely different person. She wasn't thinking of things that would make her feel bad, and she even started going to Cloud Hall's market to purchase some rare ingredients. She would use Cloud Hall's kitchen to show off her exquisite culinary skills. Truly, Margaret might be arrogant, but she was born in a noble family. Other than cultivating, she was also extremely proficient at playing zither, arranging flowers, conducting tea ceremonies, painting, and especially cooking. In the past, she was the beloved daughter of the Shi clan, and there were always many servants serving her. Now, she finally found a place to use her cooking skills. Every day, she would make exquisite dishes and wait for Zen outside the cultivation room. However, Zen didn't cultivate for just 1 or 2 days. He would often go into closed-door training for 5 or 6 days without coming out. Margaret would eat some of the dishes that she had prepared, but the rest she still saved for him, until they eventually went bad. Even if she couldn't see him for several days, she didn't complain. She waited outside the cultivation room patiently, every day, with her delicious dishes. Those cultivation rooms were also being used by many disciples of the Cloud Hall. Everyone who came and went watched her wait. Besides the elders, all of the lower-level warriors in the Cloud Hall had more or less known what she was doing here. They all knew that Margaret was waiting for Zen every day. Chapter 711, The Victor. Many of the disciples of Cloud Hall amused themselves by discussing the matter. Most of them were green with envy. As they all walked past Margaret, they stole glances at her. Zen's the lucky guy, isn't he? In just a span of 2 years, his cultivation has advanced unbelievably. He even brought back such a pretty woman who's so fond of him. Stop complaining. If you were as brilliant as Zen, you'd have successfully set up a sect-protecting array like this by now. Then, you'd have your own lady to love you, too. Have you heard of the rumors? I heard that Zen and our sect leader also had a romantic past. Keep dreaming. Do you think a proud woman like our sect leader will take a fancy to a man like Zen? Come on, my source is pretty reliable compared to yours after all. This is something that an elder has personally confirmed. Things have been stiff between them lately though. It is said that it's because of Margaret. News had spread out through different channels. For the well-informed warriors, such information wasn't so difficult to obtain. If the rumors were indeed true, what could Zen do to pacify two women on his own? Crack. As Zen pushed the door open and made his way out of the cultivation room, his eyes swept across the crowd and then fell on Margaret, who was standing nearby, smiling at him. Unlike Zen, Margaret wasn't known to be a cultivator that broke a sweat that much. She mostly relied on pills and various resources in reaching the internal elixir realm. She didn't really spend much time on cultivation. The life she lived was rather sophisticated. It was natural for warriors to dedicate all of their time on cultivation, for none of them wanted to fall behind. Even female warriors made sure of it. However, Margaret was an exception. She valued her life more than cultivation. After she had settled down in the Cloud Hall, she made it a habit to appear in front of Zen in different kinds of clothing. Even an ordinary dress looked exquisite on her. Her beauty had that kind of power. Perfection is imaginary. Just like others, Margaret had her own set of flaws. Putting aside her somehow revolting personality, one could regard her as a perfect woman. That was one of the many reasons why many disciples of the Cloud Hall envied Zen. "You're here," Margaret smiled. "Didn't I tell you there was no need to wait here?" It had been 3 days since Zen entered the cultivation room and Margaret had waited just as long. "I promised to take note of that," Margaret nodded meekly. Obviously, she only said that to avoid upsetting Zen. It was clear how she was going to keep on doing that. Zen knew it, too. This woman's persistence was carved into her bones. But her change in attitude was notable, especially whenever Zen was around. Holding a basket of delicious food in one hand, Margaret held Zen's hand with the other. They walked through a corridor and when they reached the dining area, she carefully placed out all the goodies she had in the basket, all of which were steaming hot and delicate looking. It was indeed rare for Zen to live like that. After having his meal, he inquired about the situation in the central region. When he had already gathered some of the necessary information, he returned to his cultivation room and began his endless cultivation. During that period of time, he had a feeling that he was soon to break through to the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. If he succeeded, then his chances of fighting against Eddie were higher. It was his utmost priority to find an opportunity to fight against Eddie. The reason why he came out of the training room for a break was to check if something had occurred that could bring him closer to Eddie. It wasn't just Zen who was always busy, Letitia had also dedicated her time into cultivation. Even though there was a mountain of information within the Cloud Hall that had been passed on by St. Morphans, she had thrown it all to the side. It was as if she wasn't too interested in understanding what was going on in the central region. As a sect leader, that kind of action was undoubtedly irresponsible. After the heavenly evil sect wiped out the ethereal spirit sect, their power was stronger than ever. Even the independent warriors who had joined the other large sects had all started to join the heavenly evil sect. It was impossible for those independent warriors to have a sense of belonging to these sects. They submitted themselves to whoever gave them benefits, and whoever was strong. The heavenly evil divine kingdom had both qualities. The heavenly evil divine kingdom even managed to defeat the #1 sect in the entire central region. Which sect could still block the footsteps of the heavenly evil divine kingdom? Right at that moment, the heavenly evil divine kingdom was slowly expanding to the center of the central region, swallowing up all of the mediocre second-grade and third-grade sects. How could the other less powerful sects resist? Almost without wasting a single soldier, the heavenly evil divine kingdom successfully won over the other sects. They all announced their attachment to the divine kingdom and became its vassal force. As the situation became more and more critical, the pressure on the elders of the Cloud Hall became as intense. However, as the sect leader, Letitia was completely unaware. She didn't even leave her own ice palace. "We can't let our leader go on like this. The Oracle City has already sent countless people over, but they can't even meet her. Right now, only the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance can fight against the heavenly evil sect, but our leader has no reaction. What should we do? Alas, although our leader has outstanding strength, she is currently troubled by personal feelings. This is really troublesome. Morphins, how about you go and persuade her? In the past few days, Letitia had announced that she was going into seclusion and refused to entertain outsiders. Normally, it wasn't a problem. Even 10 years in secluded cultivation was normal. However, that was not the proper time. There was a war waging and the Cloud Hall couldn't afford to not have a leader at such time. Saint Morphins was the person closest to Letitia, and at the same time, the one who understood her feelings the most. Although Letitia was already the leader of Cloud Hall, Saint Morphins still treated her like a child. After all, he was a lot older than her. He knew her personality quite well, so he already figured that there was no way to persuade her. Apart from her talents, her headstrong personality made her the leader of Cloud Hall. At the suggestion of many elders, Saint Morphins finally made up his mind and charged into the Ice Palace. In the Ice Palace, there was blue-colored frost scattered everywhere. It was condensed from the life vitality released by Letitia when she was cultivating. While she was still at the virtual tribulation realm, the frost did not have much effect on Saint Morphins. But now that she was at the life and death realm, the frost released by her had become a great threat to him. Thus, after entering the Ice Palace, Saint Morphins carefully avoided the constantly flowing energy. Not only that, but he also revolved his life vitality to resist the coldness in the Ice Palace. When he bypassed the layers of frost and found Letitia, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the situation that unfolded before him. She had actually fallen asleep there. When a warrior reached that certain level, they rarely fell asleep from exhaustion. They only relaxed their spirit through meditation. Saint Morphins had no idea just how hard she had cultivated to the point of passing out. Beside her were a few small ice phoenixes curling up. As Saint Morphins entered, they all spread their wings and stared at him warily. Soon after, Letitia also opened her eyes vigilantly. Looking at Saint Morphins coldly, she asked, "What is it?" Saint Morphins hesitated and then said, "Dylan of the World Commercial Alliance has sent people here several times to meet you. They have something to discuss with us." "Got it," she casually responded, nodding her head. She then proceeded to cross her legs. Raising her head, she asked, "What does the World Commercial Alliance want to do now?" "They're saying that we can't sit still and wait for death," Saint Morphins replied, obviously having discussed the current situation with the World Commercial Alliance before. In fact, when a war among the sects started, the situation was quite clear. When large sects fought with each other, only their strength mattered, and all sorts of schemes were useless. Now that the Heavenly Evil sect was rapidly expanding, both the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance were in grave danger. They must join forces and fight against Heavenly Evil sect together. Therefore, staying put was the worst they could do. "I see," Letitia nodded after thinking about it briefly. "Then, may I know how you're planning to deal with this matter?" Saint Morphins asked softly. "We'll figure out a way to attack the Heavenly Evil sect together with the World Commercial Alliance." Letitia seemed to have her mind made up. It was war indeed. Only then did Saint Morphins nod in approval. "I'll inform the World Commercial Alliance right away." It wasn't the Cloud Hall, but the World Commercial Alliance that was most anxious regarding the events that were about to go down. Cloud Hall still had the small circulation killing array to protect itself. Although the Heavenly Evil sect would attack the Cloudy City and the Cloud Hall sooner or later, they were still much harder to deal with than the Oracle City and the World Commercial Alliance. In comparison, the World Commercial Alliance was located in the richest city in the world, Oracle City. The Heavenly Evil sect could very possibly choose to attack the World Commercial Alliance first. The World Commercial Alliance had Ancient Tycoon and 3 leaders with unfathomable strength. Its power was comparable to that of a 6th-grade sect. However, facing both Eddie and the Heavenly Evil sect was a totally different story. They didn't stand a chance on their own. That was why the World Commercial Alliance was eager to work with the Cloud Hall. Fortunately, the transmission array connecting Cloudy City and Oracle City was still in good condition. Although the two cities were thousands of miles apart, they were just a transmission array away. A month had passed. It seemed like the longest month to ever happen. As Letitia floated out of her ice palace, she chanced by Margaret. Her gaze accidentally fell upon her. The young lady was sitting by the door of Zen's cultivation room, cupping her face with one hand while staring at the door. She looked dazed. "Margaret is my woman." Those words lingered in Letitia's ears. A part of her refused to believe that such words came out of Zen's mouth. Letitia's face sank. Envy could be seen in her eyes. If she could let go of her identity as the leader of Cloud Hall and wait for Zen like Margaret did, she would feel very happy. At that moment, Margaret felt eyes on her from above. Slowly raising her head, she saw Letitia floating by not too far away from her. As the two women's gazes met, Margaret blinked and smiled at Letitia, revealing her white teeth to her. Upset, Letitia just snorted to herself and flew away. What a lost cause. Meanwhile, Margaret turned her head back to look at Zen's cultivation room once again, her face revealing a faint smile, the smile of a victor. Chapter 712. Leaving Zen out. Most of the elders gathered around the meeting hall, waiting for Letitia's arrival. Before Letitia stepped into the meeting hall, a fierce cold wind blew in and the entire place suddenly became as cold as ice. The strong killing aura immediately enveloped everyone and the few elders couldn't help but feel flustered. With a sullen face, Letitia walked in. The elders looked at each other, all of them confused as to why their leader was exasperated. What happened to her? Who has ruffled her feathers? Keep it down, she might hear us. It was obvious that she was in a terrible mood. No one dared speak up in fear of offending her. That was the last thing they all wanted. Saint Morphins bowed to Letitia and then said, Master Ning, everyone is ready in the Cloud Hall. We can set off at any time. Okay, Letitia responded absent-mindedly. Seeing her gloomy face, Saint Morphins couldn't help but remind her, Master Ning, Zen is not here yet. The elders stared at Letitia in unison to see how she would react to that. Ever since Zen's return to the Cloud Hall, the elders had a new assessment of his strength. Although Zen was only at the primary stage of virtual tribulation realm, he had easily killed Emmanuel. His fighting capacity might have passed that of Morphins, making him an indispensable top fighter for the Cloud Hall. Although the sect wars had involved billions of martial artists, it was usually those top masters with formidable strength that had the power to decide the outcome of a battle. After a month of discussion, the Cloud Hall and the Oracle City finally reached an agreement. As the two strongest sects in the central region, they could not sit still and wait for death. They decided to join hands to fight against the Heavenly Evil sect. At first, Saint Morphins had planned to notify Zen about their moves, but Letitia told him that she wanted to do it herself. However, Letitia returned to the meeting hall with a murderous look on her face, and Zen was nowhere to be seen. Everyone was confused about what was going on, especially Saint Morphins and the other elders. There's no need to bring him with us. Gather all the warriors at and above the level of illuminating soul realm. We will set off, Letitia roared, her aura detonating. The cultivation methods she had cultivated were already powerful, but after she stepped into the life and death realm, her strength had undoubtedly increased by a mile. As they witnessed such surge of energy burst out from her, many of the elders felt a chill down their spine. Up in the air right above the Cloud Hall, countless disciples had formed an army that then flew towards the cloudy city below. If one from the cloudy city looked up, the person could see black dots falling from the sky. All of those dots were actually martial artists. It was a spectacular view for the commoners of Cloudy City. I heard that the Cloud Hall is out to battle. Alas, the influence of the Heavenly Evil sect has expanded rapidly. I think the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance are going to start the final counterattack soon. I'm afraid that this battle will determine the fate of the central region. Eddie is truly an incredible person. If he succeeds, then he has the ability to unify the entire central region. Since ancient times, there had never been a single force that had unified the entire central region. If Eddie were to make it, then he would be the first person in the history of the central region to unify the place. After the Cloud Hall warriors had entered the cloudy city, they all flew straight towards the transmission array. The first ones to enter were the warriors at the illuminating soul realm, the next ones were warriors at the internal elixir realm, which were followed by the elders at the virtual tribulation realm. Letitia, Saint Morphins and the others were the last ones to enter the transmission array. Standing beside the transmission array, Letitia lifted her head to look at the Cloud Hall floating above. Master Ning, I think it's best to bring Zen along for this expedition, Saint Morphins said. There was no valid reason he could think of as to why Letitia chose to leave Zen behind. The hostility Zen and Eddie had for one another was not a secret. Even if it wasn't for the Heavenly Evil sect, a skirmish between them was still bound to happen. Moreover, Zen had not yet revealed his true strength. He had also made such remarkable contributions to the Cloud Hall, and it was irreverent to leave him out during such an important battle. I think it's more appropriate for him to stay at the Cloud Hall, Letitia responded with a smile. Not every warrior from the Cloud Hall was there for the battle. A small group was left behind. After pausing for a while, Letitia continued, "Besides, he seems to like staying there. With a beauty accompanying him, I can say that he's having fun. He is quite obsessed with his current life. So let him stay. But, Master Ning, we are facing a very ominous foe. I think personal affairs should be put aside for now." Saint Morphin's words were straightforward. In all honesty, he was referring to Letitia's jealousy. The fate of the Cloud Hall was more important than her feelings at that time. Even if you feel sour about Zen and Margaret, you should not disregard your supreme priority, he thought to himself. Letitia only snorted at Saint Morphin's words. Without any more talking, she turned around and entered the transmission array. The other elders and Saint Morphins all exchanged glances with bitter smiles on their faces. Then, they followed suit. Meanwhile, Zen was already in his meditative state. He felt that his cultivation was one step away from the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. If he could surpass the thin layer of obstruction, then it was easier for him to steadily break through. Although Zen knew so little about the situation in the central region, he could still thoroughly analyze it himself. To him, the time when he would fight with Eddie was approaching, so he believed it was imperative for him to break through to the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. In the practice room, Zen had lost track of time. While he was meditating, both the cyan and red dragons barely made a sound. Normally, Lavender could often just leave Zen's body on her own, but at that time, she seemed to have fallen asleep and rarely showed up. After all, that was the perfect time for him to break through. Although it wasn't so difficult for him to step into the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm, it was critical for a martial artist to break through a bottleneck. He must not be disturbed at any cost. Sitting quietly at the gate of the practice room where Zen stayed was Margaret. On several occasions, she went to the Cloudy City to collect some rare flowers. She carefully trimmed them, and then cut them into exquisite shapes and created certain patterns. At that time, there were already at least 6 or 7 pots of flowers placed in front of the practice room. Those flower pots were arranged in a row and looked very lush and beautiful. During that period of time, warriors in the Cloud Hall were lesser in number. Compared to the past, there were not as many warriors that came to the practice rooms. Most of the ones who still entered were nature creatures. It was rare to see an illuminating soul realm or internal elixir realm martial artist in the Cloud Hall. The entire place had become desolate. Although Margaret clearly felt the changes in the Cloud Hall, she didn't bother to think about it. In her heart, Zen had already become the center of her world and she didn't want to mind the trivial things. The truth was that even the small tradesmen and porters in the Cloudy City knew about Cloud Hall and its huge expedition, but Margaret, an internal elixir realm warrior, didn't have a single clue. His closed-door cultivation is taking a while. Pouting her lips, Margaret stared at the door of the practice room. She cut off an emerald green root with her fair-skinned fingers and with a flick, she inserted the violet into the pot with precision. The number of flowers at the entrance of the practice room continued to increase. Every day, she placed a pot of flowers there. Originally, there were only a couple of them. Now, there were too many. The number of flowers that had bloomed at the entrance of the practice room had increased to 35. One day, a strong aura suddenly erupted from the practice room. That particular room was top level in the Cloud Hall. The partitions in the room were all made of special metal, but even those were unable to obstruct the aura in the slightest. A smile found its way to Margaret's face. Has he broken through? Will he come out today? Her now flushed face was full of hope as she gazed at the door. Thinking of what she had to say to Zen, she felt a bit embarrassed and hesitant. Click, the door to the practice room pushed open and Zen's figure flashed out with a faint smile on his face. At that moment, he had already stepped into the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. He did it. He broke through, Margaret exclaimed, immediately standing up to walk over to Zen. Sorry for the wait. How long has it been since I entered the practice room? Zen had completely lost track of time upon his entry into a meditative state in the practice room. Margaret blinked and gently said, Count these flowers and you'll know how many days have passed. Zen's gaze swept across the flowers, and his expression changed when he got the number, 35 days. I've actually practiced in isolation for so long this time. It's all right, Margaret reassured. She put her black hair to the side and softly whispered in his ear, Zen, can I stay at your place tonight? As she spoke with utmost tenderness, her cheeks turned completely red. Surprised for a moment, Zen nodded his head and disregarded his initial hesitation. The two of them were still quite young. When Zen took her virginity energy away, it was both their first time. Inevitably, they both craved the warmth they gave each other when they made love. The reason why Zen hesitated for a bit was that he still kept Letitia in his heart. He still didn't know that she was no longer in the Cloud Hall. Chapter 713. The Power Behind the Heavenly Evil Sect. Zen left the training room with uneasy steps. There was less than the usual number of disciples in the Cloud Hall, but he didn't give it too much thought. He never expected that not a single person in the entire Cloud Hall would inform him of the upcoming battle. Of course, Margaret didn't know what was going on inside Zen's mind. The words she had just said set her cheeks aflame. She buried her head in Zen's chest, not even daring to look at him. Then, Zen's warm fingers closed over hers as he took her hand and led her back to his room. Back in the underground palace, they had been all too aware of the danger that was closing in on them. Eddie had been persistent in his pursuit, and the two of them did not have much time to enjoy the happy moment of their coupling. Tonight, however, safe within the walls of Cloud Hall, there would be no danger or interruptions. They took as much as they gave, limbs entangling and lips leaving a trail of fire. Morning came and the flames had settled into a pleasant warmth, blanketing them in the comfort of sleep. The next day, the earlier uneasiness that Zen had felt had turned into a foreboding sense. There was something terribly wrong with the Cloud Hall. The halls and rooms echoed emptily as only a few souls were seen. It seemed as if the Cloud Hall had been deserted, and there were even fewer people now. He wanted to ask Roche and the other members about the situation, but discovered that they were nowhere to be found. Zen headed back to the meeting hall only to find it vacant. It was well past morning, and around this time, most of the elders would gather in the meeting hall to discuss important matters, but not a soul was here today. Zen's confusion grew with each empty room that he had run across. He walked back outside and closed the door to the meeting hall. Just as he was about to turn away, he ran into Fernandez. Fernandez was one of the elders of the Cloud Hall. His skin was wrinkled with age and his hair gleamed silver, but there was a sharpness to his eyes and a purpose to his movements. This time, he was the one who stayed behind. With all the things happening all at once, several elders had to stay in the Cloud Hall and keep watch on the small circulation killing array. Eddie was a looming threat, and they had to be prepared. If he decided to bypass the World Commercial Alliance and rashly attack the Cloud Hall, the array would be their first line of defense. Although now that the Cloud Hall's strongest warriors had already left, it was very unlikely for anyone to attack. The main forces had long left for the Oracle City, and even if the Heavenly Evil Sect members tried to attack, they would only find the place empty of people. It would only be a waste of their time and energy. Elder Fernandez, where is everyone else? Zen asked with a suspicious look on his face. Fernandez seemed to be taken aback by Zen's question as well. Has our leader not informed you? Most of the warriors of the Cloud Hall have already entered the Oracle City to join forces with the World Commercial Alliance against the Heavenly Evil Sect. Some warriors have left as early as last month, the old man explained. Zen's surprise was written all over his face at the old man's answer. No one informed me, he said in disbelief. Fernandez knew that there had been a rift between Letitia and Zen. They had been avoiding contact with each other. He rubbed his nose and shook his head with a strange expression on his face. I don't know what our leader was thinking, he sighed. What's the situation now? Zen asked with concern. Fernandez nodded his head. Zen was fortunate to chance upon him. Although he stayed at the Cloud Hall, news of the war between the World Commercial Alliance and the Heavenly Evil Sect was sent to him every day. Fernandez would be able to answer his questions. Letitia had simultaneously declared war with the World Commercial Alliance against the Heavenly Evil Sect the moment she entered the Oracle City. The combined strength of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance would make for a formidable opponent. The Heavenly Evil Sect had to take the battle seriously if they were to win. If the Cloud Hall was their sole concern, the Heavenly Evil Sect members wouldn't have to be so careful. In the whole Cloud Hall, Letitia was the only person who would be a serious challenge in the eyes of Eddie and Simon. The Sutra of Empyrean Goddess that she had cultivated was several times stronger than other cultivation methods. She only experienced one life and death crisis after entering the life and death realm, but because of her cultivation, she could fight toe-to-toe with even the warriors who had undergone 2 or 3 life and death crises. Aside from her, the Cloud Hall was just like any other sect, and was greatly inferior to the World Commercial Alliance in other aspects. The Cloud Hall's development was the same as that of the Ethereal Spirit Sect. The members of the Heavenly Evil Sect regarded it as nothing special. If they surrounded and attacked it, it would fall to their hands sooner or later. The World Commercial Alliance was a different matter altogether. It was formed by a group of merchants and had grown to become one of the most powerful and influential groups of today. In terms of the strength, the World Commercial Alliance was at the level of a 6th-grade sect. It was not a sacred place, nor a divine kingdom, but the heavenly evil sect knew there was more than what met the eye. They knew nothing of the secrets that it hid, and so they had to be careful. After the heavenly evil sect members invaded the ethereal spirit sect, the eastern area of the central region was strangely quiet. The members of the heavenly evil sect were unexpectedly not wreaking more havoc. Instead, they seemed to be resting in order to recuperate their strength. They would be attacking the World Commercial Alliance next. However, the members of the World Commercial Alliance were no fools. Their group was among the smartest and most cunning, and they would not just sit still and wait for their deaths. They took the first step in starting the war. The heavenly evil sect had made no declarations of war, and so the World Commercial Alliance took it upon themselves to do so. Joining forces with the Cloud Hall had led to this turn of events. The two strongest sects in the central region had declared war on the heavenly evil sect on the same day. Thus it was the beginning of the biggest war between sects in the central region for the last 1,000 years. Over a month after the declaration of war, both sides had earned victories and defeats. One moment, the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance would be celebrating their feats, the next moment, they would be on their knees with loss. The war was far from over. In the course of battle, the World Commercial Alliance had destroyed 2 outposts of the heavenly evil sect, and the heavenly evil sect was slowly advancing towards the central district. Everyone in the central region understood that this would be a true and decisive battle, with the victor taking everything. Whoever won could hold the fate of the entire central region in their hands. If Eddie won the war, the central region would be integrated into the divine kingdom. On the other hand, if the joint forces of the World Commercial Alliance and the Cloud Hall succeeded in defeating the heavenly evil sect, a sacred place might be born. The war was one that would decide the future. Right now, things were at a standstill. It was as if both sides were cautiously keeping an eye on each other's movement, trying to sound out their opponent's intentions and next move. One of them would eventually lose patience, and once that happened, the final battle would commence. "So Letitia is still in the Oracle City, right?" Zen asked. Fernandez gave him no direct response and instead said earnestly, "Zen, the Cloud Hall needs you." "I see," Zen replied. Now that things had come to this point, he didn't have any intentions of backing down. Letitia had gone too far this time. How could she not tell him about something as important as this? "Our leader seems to be in a bad mood recently," Fernandez uttered. Zen was surprised at the sudden comment, but he of course understood what Fernandez was hinting at. He smiled wryly, not knowing how to explain the whole thing to Fernandez. Unexpectedly, Fernandez said, "It's normal for men to have several wives. Back in the day, I had more than 20 women. It is not so complicated, but keeping a woman happy requires that you woo her the right way." Fernandez could only freely speak these words to Zen in this circumstance. If Letitia was in the Cloud Hall, he never would have dared to say anything about this. Zen was very astonished at his subtle advice. Fernandez, despite his old appearance now, must have been quite the charmer in his younger days. For a warrior, having more than one wife was not uncommon of difficult. The status of a warrior in the central region was almost equivalent to that of an immortal. Even the poorest warrior would be 1,000 times richer than an ordinary mortal. With this status, women naturally abounded around the warriors. Fernandez left Zen with these words. Zen remained standing on the balcony, looking thoughtfully at the rolling clouds above the Cloud Hall. Would a woman really become happy again after I please her? After some time, Zen returned to his room. He found Margaret having just finished her bath. Her black hair was damp as she was tying it behind her head. She was wearing only her undergarments, and her skin glowed with an appealing luster. "Come with me," Zen said to her. "Where to?" Margaret asked. "The Oracle City," replied Zen. "All right," Margaret said with a smile. She would not ask Zen for his reasons if he was not telling her himself. In the past, she would have questioned him relentlessly, but now she didn't think she had to do that. It wasn't that her personality had changed, but her thinking and perception had. Margaret had already come to think of Zen as the only person she would rely on in her life. At the same time, she understood that her feelings were not returned. They had made love once in the underground palace, but it was something that was forced, unlike the natural course of lovers. This man who was asking her to come with him did not love her. Margaret understood this clearly. He was with her only because of duty. With this knowledge, Margaret had carefully maintained her distance. She did not ask Zen for favors, nor did she make any requests or demands. If she were to cling to him, he might grow tired of her and leave. She was at peace with the fact that Zen might never return her affections. It was enough that she could be by his side. Women were indeed strange creatures. In the short span of a few months, Margaret's relationship with Zen had undergone such a drastic change. She was always mindful and guarded while staying with him, and yet, she felt small flutters of joy in their connection, even if it also bore hints of pain. After the two of them made quick preparations, they left the cloud hall and entered the cloudy city, stepping into the transmission array. Margaret and Zen disappeared into the space tunnel arm in arm, with only a flash of blinding whiteness signaling their departure. Things were not good in the Oracle City. Ever since the World Commercial Alliance and the Cloud Hall declared war on the Heavenly Evil Sect, more and more merchants started leaving the Oracle City. The numerous wealthy merchants played a huge role in running the Oracle City. These merchants were not warriors. Most of them did not know how to fight, and even the very few had skills and were only at the nature level of cultivation. They would not be of any use in battle. However, the wealth they possessed and controlled was far greater than the vast majority of warriors. Even those at the virtual tribulation realm did not come close to them in terms of money or property. The entire World Commercial Alliance was formed by these merchants. These merchants knew their trades like the back of their own hands, but there was nothing they could do about the sect war. The only way for them to secure the safety of their own lives was to leave. Since the start of the war, more and more of them had chosen to temporarily leave the Oracle City to seek refuge in other cities. The World Commercial Alliance valued money above everything else. Its members, who had control of the city's economy, knew very well that as long as they had money, there would always be warriors who would work for them. This was the main reason why the World Commercial Alliance became a sixth-grade sect. The light of the transmission array constantly flickered, transporting people to and from places. In a flash of white, Zen and Margaret finally appeared at the Oracle City. There was a long queue of merchants lining up in front of the transmission array to leave the Oracle City. Suddenly, a beautiful man and woman appeared. The sight of them caught the attention of everyone around them as the people's eyes looked at them admiringly. Zen. Before Zen and Margaret could step out of the transmission array, a voice rang out. The voice sounded familiar, but it was a faint memory. Zen could not remember exactly to whom it belonged. He looked towards the source of the sound and saw a handsome young man looking at him with a smile. His eyes widened as he finally put a face and name to the voice. Owen. It had been more than 2 years, but Zen would recognize the person in front of him with a single glance anywhere. The young man was the divine-level talent from the Woolen Grassland. Zen and Owen had participated in the martial arts contest with a goal that was surprisingly similar. Both of them were trying to kill Marilyn to prevent Eddie from creating the lustful demon array. However, in the end, Owen had failed. He was defeated by Marilyn, and his loss cost him dearly. She almost destroyed his entire body. But now, the man in front of Zen was far from the Owen back then. He exuded more strength, and had actually stepped into the late stage of the internal elixir realm. Very soon, he might be able to reach the virtual tribulation realm. Owen possessed great talent. He was an independent warrior, but he had incredible luck, and it seemed as if opportunity favored him. On top of this, he only came slightly weaker than Zen and Brent in terms of strength. It would not be far from possible for him to become a powerful independent warrior in the future. Did you join the World Commercial Alliance? Zen asked. Owen nodded and spoke with a smile. I see that you have already stepped into the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm. To this day, the two men still shared similar goals. One of them was to save his sister from Eddie, and the other wanted to rescue his lover. Owen was visibly delighted to see Zen. Come with me, he said quickly. You have just arrived at the Oracle City, so you might not be clear about the current situation. Zen nodded his head and took Margaret's hand as they left the transmission array along with Owen. Then the three of them flew towards the World Commercial Alliance's headquarters. Are all the members of the Cloud Hall in the headquarters of the World Commercial Alliance? Zen asked. Fernandez had already told Zen about the general situation, but he did not know the details. Owen's eyes flashed. Then, he said, all the warriors of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance have been mixed up. Only a few members remain in the headquarters. The majority of them have already left the city. Zen knew that the war between the sects was intense, but what he saw in the city exceeded his expectation by far. The leaders from both sides had not yet engaged in battle with one another, but blood had already been flowing like a river, painting the streets of the city in red. 2 days ago, in order to fight for the Nine Furnace City, both the Heavenly Evil Sect and the World Commercial Alliance had lost thousands of warriors, most of whom were at the Illuminating Soul Realm. Furthermore, 2 virtual Tribulation Realm elders of the World Commercial Alliance and the Cloud Hall had also perished in battle. Only the warriors at the Illuminating Soul Realm and Internal Elixir Realm are taking part in the fight now, right? Why would the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors be killed? Zen asked. Owen's face broke into a helpless smile. Well, this also confuses us. The ranks of the warriors were based on where they stood in terms of cultivation levels, and the gap between one level and another was very large. Therefore, warriors at the virtual Tribulation Realm would usually fight opponents with the same cultivation level. That 2 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance had been killed by a group of Illuminating Soul Realm warriors was a disturbing enigma. Under normal circumstances, an Illuminating Soul Realm warrior wouldn't be much of a threat to a virtual Tribulation Realm warrior. There would be too big of a gap in strength. Warriors like Zen who were able to defeat a warrior with a higher cultivation level than his own were an extreme rarity. No matter how many Illuminating Soul Realm warriors fought together, it was hard for them to combine their forces and fight against a virtual Tribulation Realm warrior. It might also be difficult for a virtual Tribulation Realm warrior to kill 1,000 Illuminating Soul Realm warriors, but when he couldn't defeat them, the virtual Tribulation Realm warrior could still escape. Even only relying on speed, a virtual Tribulation Realm warrior could make 1,000 Illuminating Soul Realm warriors collapse with exhaustion without taking damage himself. But this time, the Heavenly Evil Sect had developed a very strange fighting technique. They had used strange arrays. Making an array only needed the participation of a few warriors. For example, the septuplets of Ethereal Spirit had often formed an array together. However, the Heavenly Evil Sect had gathered hundreds of Illuminating Soul Realm warriors together to build energy arrays. It was a technique that had never been seen or heard of, but one that proved to be powerful. Even the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors would be killed instantly if they weren't careful enough. During the start of the sect war, the number of the strong warriors from both sides were almost the same. The ancient tycoon of the World Commercial Alliance had unfathomable power, and now, Letitia had also joined forces with them. As for the Heavenly Evil Sect, there were 2 Life and Death Realm warriors, Simon and Eddie. The numbers of the virtual Tribulation Realm warriors of both sides were also more or less the same. Initially, it was these elite warriors who would determine the result of the war. However, when the Heavenly Evil Sect used their special technique, the situation turned around drastically. By the strategic gathering and the use of a vast number of Illuminating Soul Realm disciples, the balance was broken. This technique is complex. Eddie could not have thought of this easily. How did they make it? After hearing what Owen said, Zen felt confused, slightly frowning. Anxiousness crept inside of him as he thought of the warriors from the Cloud Hall who were fighting in the battles. Owen sighed and said, "Even we think so. A technique of this level and power is something that would take years to develop. Our leaders are speculating that it might have come from the 4 Divine Kingdoms." The 4 Divine Kingdoms, Zen said, his eyes widening. Could it be that? Owen met his eyes steadily and nodded. Yes, there might be a Divine Kingdom behind the Heavenly Evil Sect, Owen said with certainty. Zen suddenly remembered the Holy Maiden and the Prince of the Divine Kingdom in Mist's celestial tomb. He had killed the prince, and the Holy Maiden had sworn to get vengeance. Now, her words as she vowed to take revenge on him echoed in his head. Back then, Simon had helped the Holy Maiden to dispel the curse she had received, and the old man of the Divine Kingdom had promised to give Simon the internal version of the scripture of 5 poisons as a symbol of gratitude. Zen began piecing the puzzle together. There was a chaotic ocean of stars between the central region and the 4 Divine Kingdoms. Could it be that there really were some members of the 4 Divine Kingdoms entering the central region? Chapter 714, 20% more chance of winning. In terms of geography, the chaotic ocean of stars was an impassable natural moat, but the Divine Kingdoms had a much longer history than the central region, and there were innumerable cultivators among them who were capable of crossing the chaotic ocean of stars. One thing was clear from Zen's journey to the Immortal Mist celestial tomb, that even Life and Death Realm experts, who were top-level cultivators in the central region, were merely qualified to be followers of the Holy Maiden and the Prince in the Divine Kingdom. If the Divine Kingdoms had truly intervened, then who in the central region could take on the heavenly evil sect? Zen had a somber expression. Did you draw this conclusion by yourself? He inquired. Owen shook his head. Almost everyone in the Commercial Alliance agrees with this. And so does the leader of Cloud Hall, he informed. Our leader, is she in the Oracle City? Zen asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Hearing this, Margaret immediately turned to him with interest, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Zen, who was talking with Owen, didn't notice her expression. Owen, on the other hand, was curious. How come you don't know about the movements of the Cloud Hall, Zen? He asked. Owen thought that Zen was a core member of the Cloud Hall. However, he had no idea about the pact between Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance to fight the heavenly evil sect together. It was very strange. Zen smiled in embarrassment. How could he explain the matter between him and Letitia to Owen? Besides, he didn't think that there was actually a conflict between him and Letitia. In fact, he couldn't figure out what was wrong. Letitia had suddenly become indifferent towards him for some unknown reasons, and he was at a loss as to what to do about it. This time, the Cloud Hall had sent out all their elites, leaving only Zen behind. How could he take it easy? However, after his previous interaction with Margaret, Zen had a vague understanding of how crazy women could be. Although he was annoyed by Letitia's actions, he didn't want to argue with her. After all, sometimes there was a communication gap between two genders. Zen simply couldn't understand her attitude towards him. I was cultivating in seclusion all that time and was indeed unaware of this. Owen, please tell me more, Zen said, forcing a smile. Owen replied gracefully, the leader of the Cloud Hall didn't stay in the Oracle City. Recently, she has been quite active and has been killing warriors of the heavenly evil sect. For that reason, she rarely returns to the Oracle City. According to the original plan, the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance had joined hands to declare war on the heavenly evil sect. As the only life and death realm expert of the Cloud Hall, Letitia was supposed to stay put in the Oracle City. Sooner or later, there would be a decisive battle between Oracle City and the heavenly evil sect. The life and death realm experts of both sides normally would choose not to fight before that. Once these warriors attacked, it signaled the start of the final battle. However, Letitia had broken that unspoken rule. She had joined the war alone, slaughtering warriors in the big cities that were occupied by the heavenly evil sect. Both the heavenly evil sect and the World Commercial Alliance couldn't understand how to deal with her impulsive actions. The World Commercial Alliance was worried about Letitia's safety. She was unquestionably powerful, but she couldn't fight Eddie and Simon at the same time. If the heavenly evil sect was to set a trap, which could kill Letitia, it would be a devastating blow to both the World Commercial Alliance and the Cloud Hall. The ancient tycoon of the Commercial Alliance would have to fight alone, and their chances of beating the heavenly evil sect would be even slimmer. Meanwhile, Letitia's actions were causing a lot of trouble for the heavenly evil sect too. The heavenly evil sect used a kind of fighting method which could converge hundreds of illuminating soul realm warriors' strengths, but it was not perfect. If their enemies were strong enough, they might not get the chance to converge their strengths together. This fighting method was effective against virtual tribulation realm warriors, but to deal with a life and death realm warrior like Letitia, it was not enough. Letitia hadn't used her common sense and had instead rushed to the front lines. Every time she attacked, hundreds or thousands of enemy warriors would be killed. This had greatly slowed down the expansion of the heavenly evil sect. On the other hand, preparations were in full swing at the heavenly evil sect for the impending battle. The heavenly evil sect's life and death realm warriors hadn't made any moves, nor did they show any intention to attack Letitia. Thus, the war seemed to have reached stalemate. Relatively speaking, the worries of the World Commercial Alliance and the Cloud Hall were much bigger than that of the heavenly evil sect. While Letitia had destroyed many of the heavenly evil sect's bottom-level forces, these warriors were inconsequential when it came to the outcome of the battle. It was the warriors at the highest level who would decide the result of the war. If the heavenly evil sect counterattacked, Letitia would be in great danger. All her efforts would be in vain. For this reason, many people had tried to persuade Letitia, but they had all failed. The elders of the Cloud Hall were her subordinates, so they naturally could not persuade her. The people of the World Commercial Alliance were only allies, so they could not order her to stay in the city either. She had quietly left the city by herself, and gone about exterminating every heavenly evil sect warrior she could find. She would return to the city for a quick refueling of supplies. In the past month, Letitia had stayed in the city for no more than 4 days in total. After hearing all these things from Owen, Zen asked, "So she isn't in the Oracle City now?" Owen shrugged and said, "I don't know, but most of the time, she isn't." If a life and death realm expert didn't intentionally inform others of his or her movements, how could anybody track him or her? "She's too headstrong," Zen said, shaking his head. Margaret suddenly muttered, "Agreed," from the sidelines. "What do you mean? What do you agree with?" Zen turned to her and asked. Margaret blinked once and smiled sweetly. "You were right, she's too willful," she concurred. Zen, of course, understood what she was trying to say. He merely sighed in reply before turning around and following Owen towards their headquarters in the Oracle City. After entering the World Commercial Alliance's headquarters, Owen immediately reported Zen's arrival at the city to his superiors. Soon, a servant came and led Zen to the conference hall. In the past, the World Commercial Alliance had a strong business atmosphere. So warriors didn't think of it as one of the most powerful forces of the world. This was how the World Commercial Alliance gained a reputation for being weaker than the rest. In fact, some warriors described the World Commercial Alliance as a group of mercenary merchants. However, after the war between the World Commercial Alliance and the Heavenly Evil Sect had been declared, an earth-shattering change had occurred in the Oracle City. The headquarters of the World Commercial Alliance had arranged over 100,000 runes around the Oracle City, forming a massive array formation. This formation was inferior to the Cloud Hall's small circulation killing array. What was more, it was inferior even to the Ethereal Spirit Sect's sect-protecting array. However, its only advantage was the great number of runes. After all, the Oracle City's runic tower was where many great runic experts of the world gathered, and the wealth of the World Commercial Alliance was larger than all the other sects. They had arranged those runes without worrying about the cost, and they were undoubtedly very powerful. Zen followed Owen to the conference hall of the World Commercial Alliance's headquarters. When he entered, he saw many familiar faces. Besides Morphins and other elders of the Cloud Hall, the 3 heads of the World Commercial Alliance were also present. The ancient tycoon in the Oracle City, however, wasn't there. "Zen, you're finally here," Dylan exclaimed in surprise, his round face turning red with excitement. "Mr. Shi, Mr. Yan, Mr. Mo," Zen bowed his head to greet them. In fact, after the World Commercial Alliance heard the news that Zen had returned to the Cloud Hall, they had asked Letitia to summon Zen to the Oracle City many times. However, she had evaded them each time, saying he was in a secluded cultivation. Although the two forces had allied with each other, Zen was actually a member of the Cloud Hall, so they couldn't intervene too much. After exchanging pleasantries briefly, Dylan said, "Zen, now that you've come to the Oracle City, you'll cooperate with our World Commercial Alliance to fight Eddie, right?" Dylan worded his request cleverly. He knew that the conflict between Zen and Eddie could not be resolved, so he didn't ask him to fight against the Heavenly Evil Sect but used Eddie's name instead. Zen nodded tersely but replied firmly, "Of course. Then please proceed to the Runic Tower. With your help, I believe that our chances of defeating Eddie will increase by at least 20%. Dylan said excitedly. At least 20%. Everyone was shocked by Dylan's words, but they quickly figured it out by themselves. If Zen could create an array that was stronger than the Cloud Hall's sect-protecting array, then, coupled with the strength of the World Commercial Alliance, their chance of winning would undoubtedly increase a lot. The only question was whether Zen would agree. Chapter 715, You're My Subject. Everyone's eyes were on Zen, especially the 3 leaders Dylan, Hobbs and Haber. Zen had reached the virtual tribulation realm, and while this was a great boost to Cloud Hall's combat powers, his rune skills were far superior to his strength. Naturally, everyone felt that Zen should join the Runic Tower. Everyone believed that Zen would have no reason to refuse. The World Commercial Alliance might need him to fight against the Heavenly Evil Sect, and even Zen needed to rely on them to fight Eddie. But Zen's answer was unexpected. He shook his head and said, "Mr. Shi, I'm very sorry. I can't enter the Runic Tower right now." "But why?" asked a somewhat baffled Dylan. "Right now, I don't have enough time to set up an array," Zen said, shaking his head. He drew divine textures, not runes. The amount of time he had spent and the things he had gone through far exceeded the requirements of an ordinary rune. Back then, he had spent almost 2 months setting up the small circulation killing array for Cloud Hall. Cloud Hall was only 1/10 of the size of Cloudy City, while Oracle City was more than 3 times the size of the Cloudy City. There simply wasn't enough time to set up a protective array around the vast Oracle City. But don't worry, I will join the fight, he added. It was time for him to put an end to the conflict between him and Eddie. But before that, he still had something to worry about. He had not received any news from Yan since the last martial arts contest. Eddie had wanted to take Margaret, so Zen assumed that Yan would still be all right. But where was she now? Where was Eddie hiding her? Zen had no idea at all. Dylan knew that he couldn't change Zen's mind. Back then, the boy was able to fight the warriors at the Internal Elixir Realm when he was at the Illuminating Soul Realm. He had crossed an entire realm. And now Zen had reached the middle stage of the Virtual Tribulation Realm. Would he be able to cross a realm to fight against a master at the Life and Death Realm? If he could do this, then it meant that he had become much stronger than Dylan and the other leaders. Zen, since you have made your choice, I won't force you. You can form a team with the others and follow the army's orders, Dylan said with a smile. Zen nodded and left for registration. Just as Zen was leaving the meeting hall, he saw a white figure shooting down from above, like a meteor, directly smashing through the roof of the hall. Bang! Broken pieces of rocks flew in all directions. Margaret, who had been silently following Zen all this time, cowered behind him like a little scared kitten. As a martial artist at the Internal Elixir Realm, she could simply use her protective life vitality to block these flying objects. However, she didn't have any intentions of doing so, the only thing she did was hide behind Zen. When the dust cleared, they saw that the white figure was Letitia. She looked miserable. Her long black hair, which was pulled into a ponytail and made her look much more vivacious, was now half burnt and scattered on her shoulder. There were many wounds on her body, and her clothes were also charred. Even her face was covered in bruises. Miss Ning, are you okay? Morphins and a few elders of the Cloud Hall immediately rushed to Letitia. Miss Ning, did you face the counterattack from the Heavenly Evil Sect? Dylan asked, concern in his voice. But Letitia looked relaxed. I'm fine. I accidentally broke into their trap and got a little injured. It turned out that Letitia had sneakily attacked the Heavenly Evil Sect's camp, thousands of miles away. There were more than 4,000 independent warriors in the camp. Among them, the weakest had reached the Illuminating Soul Realm, and one warrior was at the Virtual Tribulation Realm. With the powers of all the warriors at the Illuminating Soul Realm combined with Eddie's special fighting technique, the attack was brutal. Since Simon and Eddie were not there, Letitia would have been able to take the warriors down. But this time she had underestimated her opponents. Darius was the sole warrior at the Virtual Tribulation Realm. From the start, Letitia's strategy had been to kill the only warrior at the Virtual Tribulation Realm. That way she would face no opposition, and killing the rest would be a piece of cake. However, to her surprise, Darius had been a bait from the start. Eddie and Simon hadn't attacked Letitia. Instead they had sent Darius, the main strategist of the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom. Darius had always been resourceful. This time, he purposely led thousands of warriors at the Illuminating Soul Realm to the camp to wait for Letitia. Everything went as smoothly as he expected. Letitia had stepped into the trap he had laid for her. From the moment Letitia had decided to kill Darius, she had already started to walk towards the trap set by him. Under Darius's command, over 4,000 warriors at the Illuminating Soul Realm congregated in a neat and orderly manner. They were like ants to Letitia. But when they united in the war tactics, even Letitia had to take evasive actions. That was how Darius had trapped her with ease. He had not only blocked her attack, but also commanded his warriors to kill her. Letitia was considered to be extremely powerful, and even when she had fallen into Darius's trap, she was able to force her way out when she unleashed her full power. Thousands of warriors at the Illuminating Soul Realm had attacked her together, using all kinds of methods. Wind, fire, mountains, lightning and poison surrounded her all at once. That explained her bedraggled appearance. Miss Ning, please stop fighting on your own. Miss Ning, this time, the Heavenly Evil Sect set up a trap. Next time, they might fight themselves. It's very dangerous. Please think twice. The elders were trying their best to persuade Letitia. They had already tried countless times before, but to no avail. Letitia suddenly noticed Zen. She also saw Margaret behind him and immediately got angry. That woman was actually hiding behind Zen. From the looks of it, she seemed to be trying to avoid the rocks that were rolling down from the broken ceiling. How could a warrior at the Internal Elixir Realm be afraid of these things? This woman was a hypocrite. Letitia decided to vent internally. She snorted and prepared to leave. But Zen rushed to stop her. He went and stood in front of her. Fernandez's words, keeping a woman happy requires that you woo her the right way, echoed in his head. But what should he say? What are you doing? Letitia looked up and held his gaze, her beautiful eyes shooting daggers at him. She had killed many people recently, so she was tainted with many malicious auras. However, apart from the malicious aura, there was a trace of panic in her eyes. Dylan, Hobbs, Haber, and the people from Cloud Hall were all looking expectantly at Zen. It would be amazing if Zen was able to persuade her not to leave the Oracle City again. They wondered how he would do it. Tia, don't be stubborn, Zen said gently, while staring at her earnestly. His words left the warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the meeting hall speechless. Zen didn't think of himself as an outsider, nor did he regard Letitia as the leader. His words calmed Letitia, but out of the corner of her eyes, she saw Margaret behind him. As she saw the faintly discernible expression on Margaret's face, the warmth in her heart was immediately replaced with anger. She yelled reproachfully, "What did you call me? How dare you call me Tia? I am the leader of Cloud Hall and you are a member, and so you're my subject. Zen, you should know your place." Watching the drama unfold before him, Dylan could sense that things weren't going right. He wasn't from Cloud Hall, so he didn't know much about the relationship shared by Letitia and Zen. Although the elders of the Cloud Hall knew everything, they couldn't possibly publicize it outside. Morphins couldn't tell Dylan that Letitia acted willfully because she was jealous. Dylan rushed to mediate. Chapter 716, The Spirit Container. Before Dylan could stop the two of them from fighting, it was already too late. Zen was already bursting with rage. Fernandez had initially told Zen to take the wiser route of coaxing a woman first to please her, but his quick temper rendered the advice useless. Zen did initially plan to persuade Letitia, but she did not listen and even said a few scathing words that made him really angry. Letitia sneered upon seeing the morose look on his face. "What's the matter? Am I not right?" Right, Zen exclaimed, forcing a cold smile on his face. "What you said is right. You may be the supreme leader of Cloud Hall. But from now on, I am no longer a member of Cloud Hall." There was a collective gasp from Zen's declaration. The situation had now deteriorated to such a horrible state with a fight brewing between Zen and Letitia. Owen figured that he didn't really have a say in this issue, so he chose to remain quiet by the corner. Zen's actions stunned him. He couldn't believe that the young man actually dared to speak to the Cloud Hall's leader in such a rude manner. Letitia scoffed at Zen's words. "You're no longer a member. Do you think it's that easy? Do you think the Cloud Hall is a place you can come and go as you please? Those who leave without permission will be chased down by the entirety of Cloud Hall's forces." It was at this point that Dylan, Hobbs, and Haber physically formed a human barrier between the two. Dylan even made a "hush" gesture that signaled Zen to stop talking. Of course, the young man refused to give in. "I'd like to see just how the Cloud Hall will chase me down and kill me." As soon as he said those words, Letitia's face crumpled up in sadness. Her eyes were evidently full of tears, but, instead of prolonging her quarrel with Zen, she suddenly released her life vitality and turned into a flash of light that flew out of the Oracle City. Miss. Her sudden departure greatly worried the elders. Although her injuries were not severe, she would still need to stay in Oracle City to recuperate her health for a few days. Morphins was quick to transform into a streak of light to chase after Letitia. Zen, on the other hand, only snorted angrily before leaving the hall in a huff. Margaret, of course, followed closely behind him. The rest that stayed behind could only look at each other in dismay. Do you know what they were arguing about? What kind of conflict does Zen have with Letitia? Dylan shook his head, also unable to understand the situation. Letitia was the strong leader of Cloud Hall and never once cried in front of so many people. To think that an argument would send her to tears in front of so many people was inconceivable. "I don't know what happened. But somehow, I feel that these two were arguing like children," Hobbs remarked. Haber silently stood beside them, but it was evident that he was also thinking hard about what happened. "Right, but I don't think that they quarreled like children. It felt more as if they were lovers bickering about something." The moment Dylan uttered these words, the three leaders' faces suddenly brightened in realization. It wasn't a monumental revelation. The members of the World Commercial Alliance just weren't aware of it before. From the very beginning, Letitia did not bring Zen with her. After they met, they quarreled in childish ways. The only possibility they could come up with was that the two might be lovers. The three leaders shook their heads in disappointment. They faced a great enemy, but those two youngsters chose to fight at such a sensitive period. They were really too willful. Zen walked ahead with Margaret following closely behind him. They arrived at a beautifully decorated courtyard, which was the place that the World Commercial Alliance specially arranged for Zen. Zen sat down in a huff while Margaret fussed around to brew him a pot of tea. She dutifully poured him a cup and set it down in front of him. His distressed expression concerned her as she suddenly leaned against his back. Zen hummed, looking at the ceiling morosely. "You are not magnanimous nor kind enough," Margaret told him. Zen did not answer and merely flashed her a smile, nodding in agreement. She was right, he was indeed not magnanimous, nor was he kind enough to Letitia. He was only 20 years old. He had just transitioned from a teenager to a young man. He was someone with the spirit of a natural-born warrior. However, when it came to relationships, his youth was extremely evident with his attitude. He was not mature enough and, as Margaret had said, extremely lacked the kindness and maturity that were required of him when dealing with Letitia earlier. At that moment, Lavender suddenly appeared beside Zen and gave Margaret a cold glare. "Isn't this what you wanted?" Lavender did not mince words, and this was the reason why Margaret feared her. Her bluntness often made Margaret a nervous, fumbling mess. But this time, Margaret nodded and even replied, "Yes, I did want this, but Zen is not happy." "How do you know whether he's happy or not?" Lavender asked. Margaret merely shrugged. "He is definitely unhappy right now." And she was right. Zen continued to be depressed for the next 2 days. In the past, Zen's free time would often be spent cultivating. However, he spent the next 2 days being lost in thought and moping. As he thought of Letitia's face back then, he couldn't help but sigh. Does this woman love to cry so much? I just told her a few words. Why did it make her so sad? The more he thought about it, the more irritated he became, leading him to drink 20 jars of wine in one go. Due to his strong physique, not even 200 or 2,000 jars would be enough to make him drunk. Nevertheless, the 20 jars were enough for the entire courtyard to be pervaded by the strong smell of alcohol. Margaret, ever the neat freak, couldn't stand the smell. She had wanted to go to Zen's room and comfort him, but realized that he was like this not because of her. She couldn't really solve the problem for him nor make him feel better. She just wasn't that important or close to him. After the 2 days, Zen registered himself into the World Commercial Alliance. He immediately accepted the task assigned to him and quickly formed himself a small team. Afterwards, he left Margaret in Oracle City and headed towards the east. The Heavenly Evil sect was slowly expanding, from east to west. According to the experiences of other sects, the strategy for a sect war would often be like this. Lower-level warriors from both sides would usually fight first, and one side would often gain a slight advantage. Once the scales tipped slightly towards one side, the middle-level warriors would be sent out, and eventually the upper-level warriors. Once the best had come out for last, the sect war would not last long and would end with a decisive victory. There was also something called Lightning War, wherein all the sect masters would come out in the beginning and directly behead the top warriors of the other sect, thereby ending the battle quickly. All sorts of tricks and tactics were also employed for these wars. However, with the Heavenly Evil sect, everything was different. Firstly, they made use of this type of weird fighting technique wherein they did not even send out their upper-level warriors to take part in the battle. Only the lower-level warriors were sent out, and they would be enough to suppress the allied forces of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance. This was the case wherein the upper-level warriors of Oracle City had to fight against the lower-level warriors of the Heavenly Evil sect. All internal Elixir Realm warriors and Virtual Tribulation Realm warriors were separated into small teams. Each team moved in batches, raiding the Heavenly Evil sect's army and constantly trying to prevent them from total invasion and occupation. This strategy had been decided jointly by the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance. The method had proved very effective. In the beginning, the Heavenly Evil sect was still in the stage of saving up their strength, so no upper-level warriors could be sent out to counterattack. However, recent events had seen more of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance's forces being decimated in greater numbers. Many of those who perished were at the middle and even late stages of the Virtual Tribulation realm. While on his way to accept a mission, Zen coincidentally bumped into Roche and the others. Roche, Patrick, and Louis had just finished a mission issued to them half a month ago and were on their way of accepting a new one. Thus, at Zen's request, the four of them naturally formed a team. Louis was very happy that they had Zen in their team. He still remembered how brave and remarkable the young man had been in the past. All three of them had long since agreed that Zen's strength was already equal to that of a life-and-death realm warrior. With a talent like that in their team, they knew that any difficulties they would face out in the field would be solved very easily. In short, there was a higher probability of survival in their team. Such thought pleased them very much. Now that Zen has joined us, we have to change our team name. I think we should call it Red Maple Team, Louis declared with a smile. Rocher, however, did not really agree and sent him a cold glare. It's an awful name. Awful? How is this possible? Well, if you don't like it, we can call it Louis Team, he suggested once again with a grin. But Rocher shook his head in disappointment. That's even more terrible. The four of them were currently flying at a low altitude, but Zen slowed down and interrupted the brewing argument. How about Yudaman Team? He suggested. Yudaman, it's a good name, Patrick said, nodding his head in agreement. The word meant guardian angel and benevolent spirit. Louis, however, was a bit unhappy. The name is too strange. I don't understand it at all, and it's not as great as the ones I came up with. Before he could finish, he heard a loud whoosh sound behind him. Rocher had drawn out his sword, which made Louis immediately shut his mouth. 3 days later, the newly formed Yudaman team arrived at a place 1,400 miles to the east of Oracle City. The Heavenly Evil sect had initially expanded from the east and invaded most of the northeastern area. However, the siege of Ethereal City effectively made them the main occupier of the central region's entire eastern area. The four of them stood on top of a mountain overlooking a nearby city. This city is called Melody City, Rocher said, taking out his map and comparing it to the city in front of him. It's small and only has a population of less than 400,000. To compare to the population of other cities, Oracle City, a super city, had a population of over 100 million, while Ethereal City and Cloudy City, which were considered just large cities, already had tens of millions of mortals and warriors living within their walls. Thus, Melody City, with a population of just 400,000, was indeed small. Although it has a small population, it has an important military base, Patrick spoke. The Heavenly Evil sect is currently building a transmission array here since the city is located in such a strategic area. The mission this time was not to bring down the Heavenly Evil sect's forces but to destroy the said transmission array. The construction would not be completed in just a day, but it was expected that many powerful warriors of the Heavenly Evil sect would be stationed there as guards. A look of cowardice crossed Louis' features. Can the four of us really destroy the transmission array? Patrick and Rocher simply ignored Louis' fears. They were already used to his timid nature and cowardice. Besides, despite his fears, Louis was someone who constantly accepted new missions, so it could be that he was someone who merely pretended to be cowardly. Let's go, Rocher declared, and the whole team followed. Although Melody City was under the Heavenly Evil sect's control, most of the residents were mortals and warriors were rarely seen. They figured that the transmission array was secretly under construction, since sending out too many warriors could arouse suspicion from the Oracle City members. However, what the Heavenly Evil sect did not know was that news of their construction plans had already spread. Zen now led the mission of destroying the transmission array. As soon as they entered, their entire team was immediately smothered by peddlers offering their specialties. Zen and the others did not travel to the city for relaxation and effectively ignored these mortals. The four of them immediately set out to explore. The city wasn't too large, and Zen was able to spread out his senses in order to find any space fluctuations that would indicate the location of the transmission array. However, even if all four of them had spread out their senses, not one of them was able to discover any space fluctuations. Something is wrong, Zen said. I also feel that something is wrong, Louis agreed. He had been feeling extremely nervous ever since they entered the city, and it was said that cowards had the innate talent of sensing trouble to run for their lives. Louis was a person with such high cowardice skills. As long as he sensed something wrong, he would maintain constant vigilance against his surroundings. Rocher quickly glanced around. A lot of mortals abounded the streets when they entered the city. These mortals were indifferent to the sect war currently happening between the Heavenly Evil sect and the joint force of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance. No matter who came out victorious or controlled their city had nothing to do with them. Those people have disappeared, Rocher muttered in realization when he saw the now empty streets in front of them. Patrick was also vigilant. Suddenly, he pointed at the low city wall. The three others looked up and noticed a light blue enchanted barrier that had suddenly appeared and enveloped the entire small city. At this time, the mortals that had disappeared earlier suddenly opened their doors and walked out of their homes. What's wrong with these people? Lewis muttered in curiosity. More and more people had come out and filled the streets. All of them were glassy-eyed and kept walking back and forth. They were clearly still alive but looked like zombies devoid of any vitality. We might be in trouble, Zen said before looking at Rocher. Stay here. Even though there was no formally designated leader, it was apparent to everyone that Zen was the key figure of their team. Rocher obeyed, unsheathing his sword and sitting crossed-legged in the sidewalk. He closed his eyes tightly and began to gather his strength. He was well aware of how extra cautious Zen had been acting, which probably meant that he was about to meet extremely formidable enemy. Rocher would naturally also be on high alert. Patrick and Lewis were the same. They both knew these mortals posed no immediate threat but they kept their guard up just in case. Zen suddenly shot out of the sky and rushed towards the blue enchanted barrier. However, before he could even approach, a faint chuckle stopped him. Ha ha ha, it seems today is my lucky day. Who would have thought I'd be able to catch a middle-stage virtual tribulation realm warrior with the cage I set up in Melody City? A loud, sharp voice remarked. It was the voice of a child, probably 3 or 4 years old. Who are you? Zen asked, staring up at the blue enchanted barrier with caution. Not long after, a faint figure materialized hazily on top of the barrier. It had the outline of a person but it didn't feel like one. Zen could only guess that what he was seeing in front of him was a soul, or rather, the projection of a soul. It was a skill that even Zen had never seen before in the Sea God continent. Of course, within the Heavenly Feather sacred place, Lavender had used a similar technique to talk to the demon Night Queen from the upper world. However, that happened beyond the scope of the Sea God continent. Who are you? Zen repeated. Answer me. The hazy figure grew clearer and revealed a small boy with tender skin and an incredibly cute face. However, his appearance did not match with the sheer cruelty that emanated from his eyes. You don't need to know who I am. Once you enter my spirit container, you will just have to die, just like those guys. The child spoke viciously but his face looked extremely innocent. The spirit container? Zen asked calmly. The boy nodded and smiled coldly. I don't mind telling you. If I gather the soul power of several 100,000 mortals in this small city, I can project my soul. And I have the fighting soul. Zen quickly ruminated from the boy's words. It seemed that most of the virtual tribulation realm elders who died in the war had been killed by this boy whose fighting soul made it difficult for even life and death realm masters to resist him. You're not from the central region, right? Zen suddenly asked. The boy snorted. Does it matter? Just go die. Then I'll tell you. The boy gave Zen one of his cold smiles before suddenly rushing into his mind. He obviously wanted to use his fighting soul to directly exterminate Zen's soul. Chapter 717. A big secret. Zen had no idea how this boy was projecting his soul into this small city with a population of only a few 100,000. When he thought of the strange scene that occurred in this city and the spirit container that the boy had mentioned, Zen guessed that he must have controlled the souls of these people. Not only was this method unimaginable, it was also extremely cruel. There had been wars among the sects in the central region before. When a war broke out, it would involve millions of warriors and many lives were lost. However, not many mortals would be a part of it. On the one hand, it was easy to kill mortals as they had zero combat strength compared to warriors. On the other hand, killing so many mortals for no reason would bring far too much malicious aura. Thus, the gains were not worth it. Moreover, mortals were the foundation of the central region and countless talents were born from them. They were the cornerstone of the central region's development. The Sea God continent had the Tower of Sin where warriors could cultivate, but the central region had no such place for cultivation. Therefore, warriors would normally not kill mortals. If it weren't for the heavenly evil sect, it was possible that 1 or 2 sacred places might appear in the central region in another 100 years. And in another 1,000 years, there might be a 7th grade sacred place and several warriors at the Soul Sea realm. However, this time, the heavenly evil sect had crossed the line. They didn't care about the consequences. Seeing the boy drilling into his mind, Zen did not resist at all. Instead, he allowed him to crawl into his mind. Have you given up on resisting? The warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the central region are too weak. Not only are you weak physically, but your souls are fragile too. Sneered the boy. The other warriors who he had killed earlier had at least tried to resist, but Zen wasn't doing anything at all. This convinced him that Zen's soul was weaker than those warriors. Zen's soul floated in his mind, emitting an emerald green light. It had almost reached the Jasper fighting soul realm, but the cyan dragon advised him to stop training his soul. Once the soul seed was ready, his soul would merge with it and he would be able to break through to the Jasper fighting soul realm. Making the soul seed seem to be a very complicated task. Even with the cyan dragon's expertise, progress was incredibly slow. Even though Zen had stopped cultivating his soul, it was already much stronger than the other warriors. He had never met another warrior, be it on the Sea God continent or in the central region, who possessed a soul at the fighting soul realm. Neither the warriors at the life and death realm in the central region nor war sages on the Sea God continent had a soul at the fighting soul realm. He reckoned that only the mightiest warriors at the Soul Sea realm from the Purple Heart Sacred Place and the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place could possess the soul of the fighting soul realm. As for the strength of the boy in front of him, Zen had no idea, but he believed that he was probably also at the Soul Sea realm. Soon, Zen found the boy in his mind. The sneer on the boy's face disappeared when he saw Zen. The sight of the green light radiating from Zen's soul made his voice tremble. Jasper fighting soul realm. Zen smiled. My soul is indeed weak, but your soul is much weaker, like an ant's. He mocked. Hearing these words, the boy moved at the highest speed, in an attempt to fly out of Zen's mind. Battles between souls usually happened in an instant. When the boy saw that Zen's soul was already close to the Jasper fighting soul realm, he didn't dare to hang around in his mind any longer. Now that you've come, you won't be able to leave, Zen said coldly. A majestic roar echoed in his mind. Roar. It was the roar of the cyan dragon. What is that? Asked the panic-stricken boy. He was paralyzed with fear. He saw a giant dragon appearing in the depths of Zen's mind and a ray of multicolored light was spewing out of his mouth. The light released a massive attraction force and the boy was unable to move anymore. Zen's soul was floating in his mind. He didn't have any intentions of making a move. All he said to the boy was, I forgot to tell you. Your opponent isn't me, it's him. With that, the boy got sucked into the huge multicolored light instantly. Even if it was a powerful owl beast, the cyan dragon would be able to swallow it, let alone the boy whose soul was only at the fighting soul realm. How could he be a match for the cyan dragon? After gobbling up the boy's soul, the cyan dragon said to Zen, his soul is very complex. It must have been formed from the souls of countless people together. His own soul has only one strand within it. One strand. That means the other souls belong to the hundreds of thousands of mortals in Melody City, Zen said with a frown. That's right. He seems to be using some method of extracting people's souls. He extracted a strand of every person's soul and put them together by using his own soul, said the cyan dragon slowly. Zen nodded his head as he opened his eyes, and slowly headed in the direction of Roche and the rest of the people. Zen, what happened? I think I saw a soul drilling into your mind. Roche had sharp eyes. There was a hint of worry on his face. A soul battle was extremely dangerous. He didn't know whether Zen could handle it properly. I've already killed him, Zen replied triumphantly. Right then the mortals in the city opened their eyes. However, most of them were covering their heads. They felt dispirited, and some of them even fainted and fell onto the ground. A strand of their souls had been extracted and used by the boy, who was then devoured by the cyan dragon. Their souls had suffered damage as well. Naturally, they would feel the pain. Fortunately, Zen had arrived. If this continued for a long time, the boy would slowly drain the souls of all these mortals. And if that happened, all of them might just turn into zombies. At the same time, 10,000 miles away from Melody City, something was happening in the place where the ethereal spirit sect had been located. After the heavenly evil sect wiped out the ethereal spirit sect, the place was designated as its temporary headquarters. There was a large altar in the center of the grand hall, and in the center of the altar was a small 8-diagram mirror. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the mirror. This was followed by a blood-curdling scream. It seemed to be coming from within the mirror. The face that appeared in the mirror was that of the boy. Master Wallace, what's the matter with you? Master Wallace, wait a moment, I'll go get the Lord. The warriors at the virtual tribulation realm in the hall left in a hurry. Master Wallace was behaving very strangely. Even if he was just projecting a soul in the mirror, the warriors were scared of being around him. They tried to escape under the pretense of looking for Eddie. Eddie appeared in the hall shortly. He had a strange expression when he saw the crack in the mirror. He cupped his hands and asked the boy in the mirror, Master Wallace, what's wrong? Humph. The strand of my soul that was projected in Melody City was devoured by someone, Master Wallace said abrasively. Eddie was surprised. He immediately asked, although it was just a projection of your soul, it still possessed the strength of the fighting soul realm. Who in the central region could have the power to devour your soul? This person's soul is incomparably powerful. And I've also discovered a big secret, said the boy with a sneer. Really? What secret did you find? Eddie was eager to know. There's no need for you to know. When the star storm ends, I will personally come to the sky northern region. Leave that young man to me. The boy smiled wickedly. His face gradually faded. Master Wallace's message made Eddie gloomy. It was not like he couldn't guess who Master Wallace was referring to. There was only one person in the young generation of the central region whose soul was so strong, Zen. But he couldn't solve the mystery of the secret that Master Wallace spoke of. Chapter 718, River Wave City. Eddie was very sure of Master Wallace's origins. There was a vast continent on the other side of the chaotic ocean of stars. On this continent, there used to be 7 divine kingdoms along with a few other races. Compared to this continent, the central region was only a large island. 3 of the 7 divine kingdoms had been destroyed in the past in a war with the dragon lineage human. Now, only 4 divine kingdoms remained. Master Wallace came from the York divine kingdom. The holy maiden who they had met in Immortal Mist's celestial tomb came from the same kingdom. After their last trip to the celestial tomb, Elder Gong, the warrior at the life and death realm from the York divine kingdom, had fulfilled his promise and given Simon the internal version of the scripture of 5 poisons. During the past 2 years, Simon had spent most of his time cultivating it. As for the holy maiden, although she had vowed in the celestial tomb that she would lead the warriors of the divine kingdom to wipe out the central region, she hadn't. After all, it was extremely difficult to pass through the chaotic ocean of stars. This was due to the abnormally violent star storm that had been hanging above the chaotic ocean of stars since many years ago. The sky northern region and the 4 divine kingdoms were separated by this storm. According to Master Wallace, although the storm continued, it would subside with each passing year. Once the star storm weakened, the Holy Maiden would set off to flatten the sky northern region. In this case, Eddie and the York divine kingdom were not on the same side. With Eddie's personality, he would never be willing to become just a vassal. His ambitions extended beyond the central region. In fact, he even thought nothing of the 4 divine kingdoms. He was destined to step onto a higher level. He could only work with the York divine kingdom temporarily and take what he needed. He had obtained a lot of benefits from this kingdom, so, of course, he wouldn't refuse their help. Eddie had speculated that there was a huge secret hidden within Zen's body. The problem was that Zen was too cunning. The last time he had cornered Zen in the dreamy swampland, he had managed to escape. What was even more infuriating was that he had even taken away Margaret. After that, Eddie and Simon had worked together to wipe out the ethereal spirit sect and had sent people to the Cloud Hall to get Margaret by exchanging Xander. Eddie had thought that this would be a cinch and that the Cloud Hall would be willing to do so. After all, Xander was the leader of ethereal spirit sect, while Margaret was only a warrior at the internal elixir realm. Plus, she was Xander's great-granddaughter. But Eddie was wrong. They refused to do so. What was even more unexpected was that Zen had taken Margaret's virginity. At that point, Eddie's plan to form the lustful demon array had failed. Who knew how many years it would take for him to find the next girl with the purple power body? Zen's actions were unpredictable. As he was Eddie's nemesis, he not only wanted to get rid of the brat, but he also wanted to snatch the secret from Zen's body and steal his fate too. Eddie knew that he must do it as soon as possible. If the warriors from the York Divine Kingdom were to come here, he probably wouldn't have a chance. After some contemplation, he felt that his plan should be carried out faster. So he decided to stop Simon from cultivating for now and ask him to help him deal with Zen. In Melody City, Zen and his group had completed their first mission, but they didn't find any transmission arrays there. Melody City was originally a trap set up by the heavenly evil sect to lure and kill those warriors at the virtual tribulation realm who were against them. Zen did not care whether or not he could complete the mission. Truth be told, he had come just because he was still worried about Letitia. Letitia had already reached the life and death realm, and no one was able to find her when she went out alone. That day, Saint Morphins had rushed out to follow her, but given his speed, he could not track her. She had disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Since then, no one of the Cloud Hall had heard from her again. What if she went crazy and barged into the headquarters of the heavenly evil sect? She alone was definitely no match for Simon and Eddie. Since we didn't find any transmission arrays, we should return to report this, Roche said to Zen. Their trip had gone without a glitch this time around, and they had even managed to break the spirit container set up by the boy easily. But this would have been impossible for Roche, Louis, and Patrick without Zen's intervention. It was a powerful soul attack. Had it not been for Zen, the three of them would most likely already be dead. Wait, Zen hesitated. What is it? Roche and Patrick instantly became tense. Could there be some other danger in Melody City? Zen suddenly took out a white token. It originally belonged to Letitia. She had given it to him during the Cloud Road test so that they could use it to communicate with each other. There were 3 common ways for warriors to communicate with each other. The first was to use one's life vitality. This method was suitable for 2 warriors in relatively close quarters, at most, only several thousand feet away. The second method was to use message runes. With a message rune, one could contact another warrior who was far away. Message runes could even reach several hundred miles. The only downside was that the cost of manufacturing them was relatively high. The tokens also covered an area of 1 to 200 miles. One could use a token to send a message within this range. Holding out Letitia's token, Zen poured a thread of life vitality into it in an attempt to send a message to her, but the token did not react at all. Zen's face fell. This meant that Letitia was not within 1 or 200 miles of them. Let's go back and start another mission. He smiled bitterly. Zen was acting weird. Roche and the others looked at each other in confusion. They had no idea what he was up to. On their return journey, every time they traveled a certain distance, Zen would stop and pour his life vitality into the token. The token didn't react, but Zen didn't give up. When they reached almost halfway, Zen once again poured his life vitality into it. This time the token reverberated. Zen's eyes lit up, and, after a moment of hesitation, he asked, Tia. Is that you? There was no response from the other side. She heard it, Zen thought. He was sure that Letitia was within the token's reception range, but where was she? He stopped suddenly. Boss, what's wrong this time? Louis could not help but ask as he looked at a nervous Zen. Ever since Zen had given him a pair of low-grade sacred weapons, he had begun calling him boss. Is there any big city around here? He inquired. Roche approached Zen with a strange look on his face. To the southeast is Riverwave City, but that is the Heavenly Evil Sect's stronghold. A large number of its forces are gathered there. The place is easy to hold but hard to attack, so the Alliance doesn't have any plans to take down Riverwave City at the moment. The territories belonging to the Alliance and the Heavenly Evil Sect crisscrossed. Riverwave City was one of the Heavenly Evil Sect's territories and had the strongest army. It was an extremely important outpost of the Heavenly Evil Sect. It was said that Darius, the Heavenly Evil Sect's military counselor, was in Riverwave City. Zen's eyes lit up at Roche's description. She is there. Zen transformed into a beam of light and dashed towards Riverwave City. Boss, what's going on? Louis shrugged his shoulders. Follow him. Roche and Patrick sped ahead without a word. Right now, they had unconditional trust in Zen. Zen was flying high in the sky and simultaneously trying to communicate with Letitia using the token, but she didn't say a word. Hello, Letitia. Tia, will you say something? No matter what Zen said, Letitia turned a deaf ear to him. This only worried Zen further. Who knew what unwise choices she would make driven by fury? So what if she was at the life and death realm? Eddie had the support of the 4 divine kingdoms, and the Cloud Hall could not contend with their methods. Even warriors at the life and death realm were nothing in front of the divine kingdoms. After covering a distance of over 60 to 70 miles, Zen stared at Riverwave City in front of him. Immediately, a menacing rage burst forth from his eyes. Chapter 719, As You Wish. Below the Riverwave City, tens of thousands of illuminating Soul Realm martial artists were sitting in a neat row and were releasing their life vitality as they maintained a meditative posture. They were all wearing the garbs of the Heavenly Evil Sect. Many of them would occasionally take out low-grade life vitality crystals, crush them, absorb their life vitality, and then release it through their own bodies. Above them, hundreds of internal elixir realm martial artists were rapidly traveling back and forth. After being divided into groups, their life vitality would be gathered together and it would form several thick beams of life vitality that would then shoot upwards. Above these internal elixir realm martial artists, there were 6 virtual tribulation realm martial artists in green who were setting up a giant rune using the beams of life vitality. In the middle of the rune, there was one person, Letitia. No one in River Wave City could match Letitia. If what happened had happened in the past, no sect would be able to bring Letitia down, even if they gathered all of their warriors to fight as a single unit. In that scenario, Letitia would be strong enough to slaughter all of the warriors in River Wave City all on her own. But that was before. The Heavenly Evil sect had developed an uncanny way to fight, and it had worked brilliantly for them. First, they would gather the life vitality of tens of thousands of illuminating soul realm disciples in order to form a big array that could cover the sky. This big array would then be controlled by 6 virtual tribulation realm warriors, and with that, they would trap their prey, Letitia, in this instance. Despite being a warrior at the life and death realm, Letitia couldn't break out of the bubble that was enclosing her. She continued to attack the rune, but she was already showing a trace of exhaustion on her face. Every time she accumulated her life vitality, a horrifyingly cold energy would burst out of her body. Under the extreme cold, the rune that was trapping her would greatly dim. Still, she would not be able to break through the rune. Despite that, no one from the Heavenly Evil sect dared to underestimate her, and her strength as a life and death realm warrior. When the life vitality in the rune became depleted, the illuminating soul realm martial artists below would take out life vitality crystals to supplement it. After that, they would continuously send life vitality upwards. They didn't need to fight. All they needed to do was to sit, and spend their own life vitality. This method of fighting was eerily similar to Zen's small circulation killing array. Its primary principle was to use over 1,000 small runes to provide energy for a larger, much stronger rune. The division of labor was clear, and its efficiency was increased by tenfold. The 6 virtual tribulation realm martial artists continued to control the life vitality coming from below them. Then, using the rune, they would launch a counterattack at Letitia. The space inside the rune was several thousand feet long and wide. Letitia was moving around, trying her best to avoid the attacks. Although she was enclosed in such a space, it was clear that it would not be easy for them to kill her. And within a short period of time, the two sides were already starting to confront each other. Zen rushed over. He had no idea how long Letitia and the Heavenly Evil sect had been locked in a face-off, but seeing Letitia's miserable state broke his heart into pieces. Deep in his heart, he still cared about Letitia a lot. To be honest, Letitia held a much more important position in Zen's heart as compared with Margaret. When Zen got angry earlier, he had contradicted Letitia defiantly. He didn't expect that she would run away in anger. More surprisingly, she actually went all the way to such a dangerous place by herself. River Wave City had been occupied by half of the forces of the Heavenly Evil sect. Even the Alliance had avoided the city. What were you thinking? Did you really intend to take the city by yourself? Is everything just a game to you now? Zen thought as he looked on what was happening. It didn't take Rocher, Lewis and Patrick long to arrive. As they saw the scene before them, the expressions on their faces drastically changed. Master Ning is trapped in the rune. Hurry back to Oracle City and call for reinforcements. Lewis immediately cried out the moment he saw what was happening. It's too late for that, replied Rocher with a cautious look on his face. Patrick was also wearing a worried look on his face. As members of Cloud Hall, how could they just stand watching as their head was being attacked in front of them? And worse, she had a high possibility of perishing in front of them. At that moment, Zen said to Rocher and the others, "Guys, please, don't do anything now. Let's just wait for a moment." The Heavenly Evil sect martial artists had used such a special tactic to unleash a power that could even trap Letitia. As Rocher and the rest weren't as strong as Letitia, it was almost sure that they would be killed if they acted on impulse. Thoughts swirled inside Zen's head. How would we deal with this situation? Rocher didn't say anything else. But soon enough, he took out his long sword, closed his eyes and then started to gather all his energy. He was fully aware that his combat power was insufficient to deal with the disciples of the Heavenly Evil sect. The only people he could match with in terms of strength were the warriors at the later stage of the internal elixir realm. But even if he was no match for the warriors at the primary level of the virtual tribulation realm, if he used his sword eye to gain momentum, he might have a chance. Seeing this, Patrick and Lewis braced themselves. They were not any stronger than Rocher, and so all they could do was to stand on his sides with the sole purpose of protecting him. Such a battle was not something that warriors of their level could get involved in. As all of these were happening, Zen started slowly approaching River Wave City. At that time, he was only 5 or 6 miles away from the city. Slowly, he raised the message token and said in a low voice, "Tia, I see you." While he was speaking, he was looking at Letitia, who was still trapped by the rune. A burning attack was just launched against her, and fortunately, she was able to dodge it. When she heard Zen's voice, her head jerked up, and she immediately looked towards his direction. Her face was pained, but she still did not say anything and just continued to attack the rune. "I know you heard me," Zen said. Indeed, Letitia had heard him, but she was just unwilling to talk to him. "You don't want to talk to me? Well then, I'm leaving," Zen said half-jokingly. But Letitia once again didn't reply. Instead, he saw that she was once again starting to attack the rune. Unfortunately, the rune looked very stable, and Letitia's attack did not harm it one bit. With an exasperated voice, Letitia suddenly replied, "Just leave. You're no longer a disciple of Cloud Hall. My life or death has nothing to do with you." Upon hearing Letitia's words, Zen couldn't help but sigh. "This woman is really stubborn," he said to himself. His anger was slowly brewing inside him, but he thought for a while and calmed himself down. With a deep breath, he said, "I'm sorry, Tia." "Sorry for what?" Letitia replied emotionlessly. "I shouldn't have spoken to you like that," he replied back, his voice hushed. Letitia pursed her lips. The life vitality in her hand turned into a blue curtain of frost and ice, blocking her from the front. A raging inferno suddenly appeared in the rune and rushed towards her. Despite the great power of the raging inferno, it was still unable to break through the wall of frost and ice that Letitia had created. "There's nothing that you shouldn't have done. Don't men always do the right things?" Letitia said, her voice as cold as her powers. A wry smile graced Zen's lips. It seemed that Letitia couldn't let go of what happened between Margaret and him. At this critical juncture, Letitia brought up old scores again. Zen didn't know what to say. "I admit that I was wrong. I'm so sorry," Zen said apologetically. "I'm sorry, Zen." "It's too late," Letitia replied coldly. "Then how will you forgive me?" Zen asked. "I'll forgive you if you die," she answered flatly. The wall of frost and ice around Letitia began slowly melting, so she abruptly shot out a strand of life vitality and began to reinforce it once again. "As you wish," Zen replied as he smiled. Without saying anything else, he flew towards Riverwave City. "What? Wait, oh no, Zen," Letitia cried as she saw Zen rush down the city like a madman. With her eyes as wide as plates, she screamed in her heart, "Are you crazy?" Although Letitia was currently in a disadvantageous position, she would not die. Even without the help of others, she might still be able to escape the rune. The method of combining the powers of tens of thousands of warriors for a single purpose was not without its own flaws, and Letitia was hell-bent on finding its weakness. The life vitality that was gathered together itself was extremely complex, not to mention the life vitality of the tens of thousands of warriors that were contributing to it. Even the movements of the 6 virtual tribulation realm martial artists were not the same. As long as Letitia had enough time, she believed that she could find this whole thing's flaw. In the past, Letitia would have warned Zen not to come over. Although she could not break through Heavenly Evil Sect's tactic for the time being, it would not be difficult for her to escape unscathed, especially if she used her trump card. With Zen's sudden involvement, however, things had become much more complicated. As Letitia was sure that Zen didn't know how terrifying this battle technique was, she started becoming nervous. Darius, who was the most important person in Riverwave City, sneered when he saw a warrior at the middle stage of the virtual tribulation realm rushing into the city. Interesting. Another brainless fly enters the birdcage. The birdcage was a method of fighting. It was a technique that handed down from the York Divine Kingdom. Mainly, it was a technique where the strength of thousands of warriors was gathered. However, Eddie and Simon didn't seem to be good at commanding. On the contrary, Darius was a natural commander, and under his command, the movements of tens of thousands of warriors were highly unified. This tactic had its own name, but Darius liked to call it birdcage. He arranged a cage and waited for the birds outside to rush in. It truly was an appropriate name for what they were doing. What is that guy thinking? I'm able to trap the head of Cloud Hall successfully, and she's at life and death realm. I'll be able to kill him in an instant, Darius thought inwardly, chuckling softly. Slowly, he extended his hand and took out a black banner. Then, he waved it in the air, creating a special shape. The illuminating soul realm warriors below still continued to send their life vitality upwards, and the internal elixir realm warriors at the middle level were still traveling back and forth. They changed the direction of some life vitality and shot it towards one of the virtual tribulation realm warriors. Originally, 6 virtual tribulation realm warriors had set up the giant rune together to trap Letitia inside. But now, 3 of them changed to use the life vitality sent from below to attack Zen. So basically, half of the strength of those tens of thousands of warriors had been shifted towards Zen's direction, with the sole purpose of killing him. As a result, Letitia felt that the pressure lessened. Even if a ray of life vitality was basically after him, Zen's face didn't show the slightest trace of fear. If Darius knew that the warrior he was trying to get killed was Zen, he definitely wouldn't have only used half of his power to attack Zen. But since he didn't know, he thought that it was already enough to kill some unimportant yet exceptionally brave warrior who had the audacity to enter River Wave City. As she saw this scene unfolding, Letitia increasingly became anxious. Although she could still protect herself from the rune, she wouldn't be able to break through it in a short period of time. Go to perdition, Darius laughed coldly as he waved the black banner in his hand again. Then, a yellow banner appeared, circling around his other hand. Sizzle. The life vitality of tens of thousands of illuminating soul realm warriors turned into a huge blue electric net that suddenly wrapped Zen inside. At the same time, the electric net began to contract violently, releasing power that was far stronger than the attacks of ordinary virtual tribulation realm warriors. Rocher's eyes were tightly shut. He knew that Zen was facing great danger, which was why he was quick in gathering his strength. The power of the sword eye was terrifying, but it took a very long time to activate it. On his sides, Patrick and Lewis were standing guard. Despite wanting to do anything else, they couldn't as their strength was below his. Boom! When the electric net reached its limit, it suddenly erupted, leaving a ball of incandescent light in its wake. As the light completely condensed, its momentum and might became comparable to the full force of a life and death realm warrior. Letitia's heart trembled, and a strong feeling of regret sprouted in her heart. Zen, even if Letitia was hit by this attack, she wouldn't be able to escape without any kind of defense. While she knew that Zen had an extraordinary physique and had already broken through to the virtual tribulation realm, she wasn't sure if he could block such an attack. Do you really want to die because of a single sentence? Don't be so silly. Letitia stared at the light, her face full of worry. Not long after, the blazing white light slowly disappeared. Many of the martial artists' eyes were focused on it. Darius had a cold smile on his lips. He thought the man should have already turned to ash. However, his expression immediately darkened the moment he saw that the warrior he tried to kill was still alive, unharmed. Am I stupid? Zen asked, as he floated unharmed, with a smile on his face. He looked back and turned to where Letitia was. As Zen was safe and sound, Letitia's anxious heart became fully at ease. However, her face darkened as she coldly said, "Well, you can go to perdition." The life vitality of over 10,000 illuminating soul realm warriors, when gathered together, would be exceedingly terrifying. Even if Zen had the body similar to a high-grade fairy weapon, he still wouldn't be able to resist such magnitude of power. If he had resisted the blow physically, he would have been seriously injured, if he didn't die. However, before that power erupted, Zen had already circulated the power of the space law to float outside the space. This was what made the space law invulnerable. The space law and the time law were the two most mysterious of all laws. It was true that controlling this type of law was difficult, but once one was able to control it, he or she would have unlimited edge over his or her opponents. Now that Zen had mastered the second layer of the space law, he was like a fish swimming in space. No matter what storm might come, he would be as good as a fish in water. It was very difficult to hurt him unless his opponent was also proficient in the space law. Facing this man who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, Darius realized that he was probably in big trouble. Previously, with the birdcage, he could guard River Wave City without any worries. Occasionally, he would lead thousands of warriors to go out and train. Those ordinary virtual tribulation realm martial artists weren't matches for him. As long as he waved his banner, he could easily kill them. The moment he returned to River Wave City, the head of Cloud Hall had already launched crazy attacks on his city. As they were caught off guard, thousands of people were killed. Even Darius himself had almost lost his life. Fortunately, he was able to run away fast enough. In a moment of desperation, he quickly gathered all of the warriors in the city and quickly arranged his birdcage. When he realized that he had captured a huge bird, a life and death realm warrior, and he had the liberty to kill her, he was overjoyed. It was only a matter of time before he succeeded. If Letitia wouldn't be able to break through the birdcage soon, her life vitality would be exhausted at last. By then, she would be too weak to fight back. Also, Darius had so many plans with her. That woman was the head of Cloud Hall. She was probably the strongest woman in the central region. Moreover, she was shockingly young and had not yet married. If he could capture this woman alive, Darius had already been lost in reverie. He was very confident that he would be able to turn his illusions into reality. As long as he exhausted Letitia's life vitality, he would have a lot of methods at his disposal that would make her lose her ability to resist. Moreover, he would change her into a dissolute woman. That was why Darius had been extremely patient in this battle. Under that patience, he had hidden a burning desire that would do everything to get satiated. Never would he have thought that a virtual tribulation realm martial artist would appear at this time and ruin everything. River Wave City was the outpost position of the Heavenly Evil sect. For the time being, Oracle City would not send out any troops to attack them, but why did Zen suddenly attack them? When Darius saw Zen, he immediately gathered the power of the birdcage in order to get rid of him. He never expected that Zen's strength was far beyond his imagination. Darius was experienced, but he wasn't sure what method Zen used to avoid his attack. He only knew that he was in danger now. However, at this critical juncture, he would not easily retreat, much less flee. River Wave City was a sturdy fortress, so he wouldn't leave it behind. Moreover, he knew that he couldn't outrun the head of Cloud Hall. Right now, he could only fight as his life was on the line. Whirl! Darius quickly waved his banner, and the 6 virtual Tribulation Realm Elders also quickly changed their positions. While drawing life vitality to support the rune in the air, they were setting up another giant rune. The rune flashed and immediately shrouded in Zen's direction. No matter what happened, Zen would not let Darius get what he wanted. He didn't stop at all but flew straight towards the illuminating Soul Realm warriors at the bottom of the group. If they kept supporting those virtual Tribulation Realm warriors above, this array would never be broken. Zen knew how to break the array with a glance, and a sneer appeared on his face as he turned towards the illuminating Soul Realm warriors. Since these independent warriors had chosen to join the Heavenly Evil sect, then they must be ready to die at any time. Chapter 720, The Decisive Battle. The illuminating Soul Realm warriors were sitting straight and upright in rows. Even when there wasn't any trouble around, they were alert. So when Zen plummeted before them, the expressions on their faces changed drastically. They didn't know much about him, but they were afraid of him. Even the 3 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors, who had gathered the life vitality of over 10,000 illuminating Soul Realm warriors, didn't stand a chance against him. How could the likes of them resist his powers then? Besides, Darius had given out a strict order that no one was allowed to retreat without permission. They had to stay there even if they had to be killed. Those who violated such an order were to be executed without mercy. When Zen moved rapidly downward, those illuminating Soul Realm warriors were his targets of slaughter. Since he was too powerful, they were only like a bunch of ants in his eyes, ready to be crushed in one stomp of his feet. Zen kept on attacking and killing those warriors in the River Wave City. Wherever he went, severed limbs and fresh blood flew in the air, forming a clear line of blood as if a giant picked up a paintbrush and drew one stroke of a shaky line using his red ink. At first, those illuminating Soul Realm warriors could still hold on. The deterrence of the Heavenly Evil sect was still very strong for these independent warriors who had just joined the sect. However, as Zen continued to kill more of them, countless of malicious aura burst out of his body and those illuminating Soul Realm warriors who were sitting still on the ground could no longer endure Zen's attack. No one wanted to be killed by Zen like ants. That guy is mad. If we stay here, we'll all die. Flee. In the beginning, there were only a few warriors who tried to run away. The supervisors on both sides brandished their sabers to prevent the warriors from escaping, and those who dared to flee were all killed by them. However, more warriors decided to escape as time flew. Eventually, most of them shot out in every direction of the River Wave City. Tens of thousands of illuminating Soul Realm warriors scattered everywhere. Even Darius couldn't control them. He didn't have the ability to kill them all by himself. Seeing as the situation had already gone amiss, the internal Elixir Realm warriors in the middle layer didn't want to stay in their original place anymore. They also began to flee the city. Those independent warriors did not have much loyalty, to begin with. The reason why they chose to join the Heavenly Evil sect was that the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom had a lot of power and the warriors could get some benefit if the Heavenly Evil Divine Kingdom took control of the central region in the future. Ultimately, their lives were the most important. If the warriors in the low layer didn't provide enough life vitality, how could the 6 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors be able to catch Letitia? The giant rune covering Letitia gradually dissipated. Then, Letitia slightly raised her hand, and bits of snow-white light condensed in her hand, quickly forming a large ice halberd. Looking coldly at Darius, she said, "Go to perdition." Upon seeing that things really weren't going well, Darius hurriedly retreated towards the outskirts of the River Wave City. But how could he escape from Letitia? Letitia gently waved her large ice halberd, and as her figure flashed, the long feathers of the ice phoenix stretched out from her back, with a length of over 10 feet. They continuously fluttered in the air. Huff, huff, huff. When Letitia was 100 feet behind Darius, he suddenly felt his movements become sluggish. Not only his flying speed but also the circulation of his life vitality within his belly became extremely slow. As Darius slowed down, Letitia approached him in an instant. As she stared at him coldly, she pursed her lips and blew a mouthful of air towards him. In just a blink of an eye, a layer of frost enveloped Darius, freezing him into a block of ice. Before Darius fell to the ground, Letitia had already flourished the ice halberd in her hand and struck at the human-shaped ice block furiously. Clang! Instantly, Darius was smashed into pieces of ice flowers. Meanwhile, Zen was unceasingly chasing down the 6 virtual Tribulation Realm warriors. The 6 warriors also felt helpless and upset when they saw that the situation had taken a turn for the worse. They all had chosen to escape at that time, fleeing towards 6 different directions. Afraid that Letitia might leave him again, Zen stopped chasing after the other warriors when he had already killed 2 of them. But with his current speed, he could have taken down at least 3 or 4. Just as Zen had expected, Letitia glared at him from a distance after she had just killed Darius. Then, she turned into a white flash of light and flew towards the south. Seeing this, Zen let the forceful energy within his body erupt, increasing his moving speed to the maximum to chase after Letitia. As for Rocher and the rest, they could only blankly watch Zen and Letitia quickly leave. They all looked at each other in dismay. "What should we do?" Lewis asked with his eyes wide open. "There's no need to chase after them. We'll go back to report this matter. We have succeeded in attacking the River Wave City, which might be the best news we can tell in a long time." Rocher responded immediately. It was evident that there was a conflict between Letitia and Zen, but it seemed as if the situation wasn't as bad anymore. Moreover, they moved at very high speed, so it was impossible for others to catch up to them. It was better for the rest of them to go back and report the matter immediately. Although Letitia flew very fast, Zen also moved at great speed. One after the other, the 2 streaks of light drew an arc across the air over the central region. Seeing that she couldn't get rid of Zen, Letitia suddenly stopped in midair, pointed her ice halberd towards Zen and asked, "Why are you following me?" When Zen saw Letitia stopping, he slowly approached her. At the same time, he said flatly, "As the leader of the Cloud Hall, you should not act so recklessly on the battlefield. Have you ever thought about the interests of the Cloud Hall?" Upon hearing Zen's inquisition, Letitia gritted her teeth. "What I do has nothing to do with you." Zen slightly smiled and continued to approach Letitia carefully. Letitia shook her large ice halberd and shouted, "Don't you come any closer." However, Zen only ignored Letitia's warning. He was still slowly walking towards Letitia, and his gaze also gradually became gentler. When Zen got too close, Letitia swung her weapon and struck Zen pretty hard. Bam! The impact of the ice halberd on Zen's body caused him to heavily dive downwards like a shooting star. Even if Letitia did not employ her life vitality to hit him, her attack was still quite powerful. She was a life and death realm warrior, after all, a force to be reckoned with. Boom! With a loud noise, Zen fell to the ground. If it was just another virtual Tribulation Realm warrior that was struck by Letitia, he could have ended up suffering a serious injury. But Zen's body was strong, so only wisps of primordial energy appeared. Therefore, the attack didn't cause him any major harm. Letitia knew that, too. Despite all that they had gone through, she couldn't let Zen die. After Zen crawled out of the large hole that his own falling had created, he once again flew towards Letitia with a determined expression on his face. This time, just as Zen was about to get close, Letitia suddenly swung the ice halberd in her hand and hit Zen for the second time, dropping him to the ground once more. I told you not to come any closer. Letitia yelled. Persistent, Zen still refused to listen and continued to rush towards her. Over and over again, he was thrown to the dirt. Gradually, a number of holes caused by Zen's impact on the ground could be seen. As they continued like so, more and more pits appeared on the ground. Finally, Letitia thought it was time to stop hitting Zen. She let her ice halberd hang in the air and gazed at Zen. Calmly, Zen flew towards Letitia again and slowly passed by her ice halberd. This time, Letitia did not hit him. They got closer and closer to each other. Then, Zen stretched out his hand towards her and pulled her into his embrace. Stop being so stubborn, he whispered. Letitia's petite body suddenly tensed up, and the rage that was filling up her head went away. Her pair of beautiful eyes were filled with tears, and then she nodded and uttered, "Okay." They didn't say anything else, just silently embracing each other like that. 3 days later, Letitia finally returned to Oracle City. The news about the River Wave City being destroyed by Letitia and Zen had already spread throughout the entire Oracle City. Since the start of the war with the Heavenly Evil Sect, the River Wave City had been difficult to attack as it was strategically located. Back then, the Oracle City's refusal to send troops to attack the River Wave City was based on various considerations, and the biggest scruple was that they were afraid that Eddie would directly fight a decisive battle with the allied forces of the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance. Since the Heavenly Evil Sect had become more powerful at the time, both the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance were no match even if combined. Now, both sides were saving up their strengths for the battle. However, just after the River Wave City had been attacked, the thing that the Oracle City members feared the most had happened at last. As expected, Eddie indeed lost his patience. Enraged, he led the army of the Heavenly Evil Sect and rushed straight towards the Oracle City. In the eyes of the World Commercial Alliance members, Eddie chose to take action at that particular time mainly because the River Wave City had already been destroyed. What they did not know was that Eddie did so because of Zen. He wanted to take the secret away from Zen and possess it before Master Wallace crossed the chaotic ocean of stars. No matter what, the decisive battle that spanned over half of the central region was about to begin, and all the warriors in the Oracle City were about to engage themselves in it. The atmosphere turned heavier by the day.